Swapping back over to Group A, and it's Gore and it's Trelly to continue on this path for today. And as you can see below us, we're going to be jumping to the Tanuki and the Bolts. Now, Trelly, the winner of this one will find themselves up against Hex Mambo from earlier, which...
What a prize.
Talk about a prize,
Yep.
right? But you got to make it through them, or at least everybody else in this group, in order to go to Group C and presumably make it through Hex Mambo if you want to make it to Worlds. So there's definitely going to be some rivalry there. Tanuki coming in at the 4th seed, Bolts coming in at the 6th seed. The loser will then go up against Yodi Gang, who we saw a little bit earlier as well with Hex Mambo. And again, all of this is separated into 2 groups. We saw Group B, Group A. They play the same way, double elim, best of 3s. 2 teams from each group qualify to Group C, and then 2 teams from Group C will qualify into Worlds. And you should remember this because it's not just this week, but next week in North America that we're going to be doing this for the EU playoffs. So, not only determining the 2 top teams in Europe, the 2 top teams in North America, but we're going to be determining as well the other 4 teams, those that I just mentioned, going to the qualifiers. And of course, from there, you'll be playing your Hounds, your Gladiators, Ravens, and I'm blanking on the 4th team, but somebody else who's really, really difficult to try and take down that you will then have to make it through in order to go to Worlds. And so that all maybe riding on their shoulders right now, but you have to make it through your first set. And of course, it is, again, the Tanuki, who you can see behind me, and the Olympus Bolts, a very different team from what you might remember, but some familiar names. Duduin, OtherTheAnother, and BeroTheBeast stand out to me on the Bolts. OgiBre, TheFrenchEmperor, Pikarino, Calvìn, and StreakUp, all 5 players of the Tanuki, who have been around for a little bit, Trelly.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen these teams sort of, evolve and change their dynamic, but the Tanuki are a team that stands out to me for sure. I've seen a lot of these guys play for quite some time over in the EU SEC, and they never disappoint. I was going to say they always disappoint, but I obviously meant the opposite.
Yeah.
they never disappoint, and I think that's going to be something the Olympus Bolts have to prepare for. They knew a matchup like this would be coming, coming in at the bottom seed for the USCC. You got to bring everything if you want to try and climb out of this bracket. So beating a team like the Tanuki is never going to be easy, but as we've seen already throughout the entirety of this week so far, sometimes these lower seeded teams, man, they can absolutely bring it.
And hell, what we just saw from the Penguins, right? Pushing the 2nd seed in Europe all the way to 3 games is something that is very difficult to do. We'll see what these teams have to offer for us as we jump into Game 1, picks and bans. Tanuki will be the first pick. So what I've learned so far today,
right?
And again, this is going to be relevant for this week, and the next week North America is probably going to keep like some of the notes, but change up there and give us their own flavor. But Hachi, definitely high priority.
Yep.
Chernobog, Raijin, Opwash, Poseidon. But we'll see how much that changes from some of the top teams, the SOC teams here, to your 4th and 6th seed. And so far, nothing too out of the ordinary. Yamoja up front, which is someone who has been kind of on the edge of getting banned. Raijin plus Thoth, banned out by the Tanuki. Athena, Chernobog, and Mamong, banned by the Bolts, which leaves Poseidon open and first picked here for the Tanuki.
Yep, amazing that the Poseidon is still this high prioritization, considering how much pressure he can bring to the solo lane and also just that burst damage. And to combat that burst damage, the Bolts are going to grab the Heim, which we've talked about endlessly in the duo lane, just how safe that Heimdallr can be. But the Cuckoo, who I'm still amazed at how high priority he's becoming now. Plenty of damage. I hinted to it earlier on, but it's going to be difficult to contest any sort of objectives when Cuckoo's around.
And normally I would say, oh, well, what if you had like Thoth, if you had Scylla, like if you had something else, still, honestly, still difficult to contend because Cuckoo does so much damage with his ult. But at least you would have had a better chance. Instead, it's Baba Yaga Khepri locked in for the Tanuki, with the Ganesha rounding out the Bolts. Now, the thing that's interesting to me, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but like Kukulkan, presumably you could play him in solo, but that's not really, in the conversation of what's been making mages really good over there. Instead, it feels like that's who I was waiting for, the Opwash. I was like, and somehow he makes it through the bans as well. But I was really confused and surprised that no one picked it up in the top 6.
Yeah, maybe it's because the Tanuki have a decent time killing the Opwash. I feel like most comps have an okay time at diving Outwash because he's very easy to dive, but
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you want to just, let him through this far into the picks and bans. It seems that they're a little bit more worried about jungle presence, if that was the case. And the Naja and the Daji get taken away, but it's actually the Chaac that gets locked in last. There were some buffs to Torrent. I've seen a lot more damaged Chaac. Doesn't mean that I'm a supporter of the jungle, but
Not yet.
I can understand why he's valued a little bit higher here.
Now, man, I'm gonna be open and honest. I was real on board with this Bolts draft. I loved it.
Okay.
For pretty much every step of the way. The Chaac has thrown me for a loop. But I want to ask, Camazotz, especially like Ishtar, you've got a good amount of fighters, it feels like, on the Tanuki.
Yeah.
Is this Chaac going to be able to keep up with the Camazotz's pressure?
It's going to be difficult because Kama does farm the map very efficiently, and he's almost impossible to kill, especially in a 1v1 setting. Bat out of Hell is going to get you out of trouble 9 times out of 10, unless you're getting bursted down, which Cuckoo and Outwash could certainly do. But I'll have to see. Maybe the buff to Torrent is exactly what Chaac needed to be great in the jungle.
Well, it's going to be fun to watch. We've got Chaac in the jungle after, again, some recent buffs. The Tanuki and the Bolts. The only way to find out and kick things off is to go down to the casters.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gore and Trelly. Man, game one, and we already get to start off with a Chaac jungle. Should be at least a great start up here. I'm J-Mac, joined by Kaizo here as we get ready to jump into the Tanuki versus the Bolts for our third set of the day here in the SCC qualifiers. This Road to Worlds to get these guys up and for that last chance to jump up there. Kaizo, should be an exciting set as we get ready to hop in here.
It should be, and I do need to say on the front end, J-Mac, I was on board with Goremizer for the entire ride. Like, we're watching the Bolts draft, and I was like, oh, they got the Outwash for the solo lane, they got Kukulkan in the mid lane, one of the premier picks right there, another rising star in the meta, and then the same thing, we got to the Chaac pick, and I was not as impressed by it. And keep in mind, I'm a person who turn the clocks back 3-4 years ago. I've been playing the jungle myself. Like, it is a ton of fun. It's a great time to just run down whatever's in front of you. I don't think that necessarily means that I'm excited to see it for the Bolts. I think that it still is going to struggle when paired up with something like a Camazotz that I think just has an easier time diving, can farm a little bit more quickly, higher burst damage early on, but obviously does some things a little bit differently than the Chaac that wants to be that more utility style. My eyes are going to be on OtherTheAnother because he's definitely the one with the onus on him to prove that what he picked is actually going to work.
Yeah, I think that's where my eyes turned as well, is really for both of the junglers of these teams. FrenchEmperor, ever since kind of his come up in, we saw him, I think it was the Zinedine Zidane team that he had a while back for I think it was an SPL qualifier that they had played in. Looked really strong, had a great, kind of standout performance there, and ever since then has really looked good over here in the SCC or even the SOC at times that he's dipped down and already trying to make his way over towards the duo lane. Shield buff spawning in, but Lode, Dutsher, they're recognizing something is up, they're fishing something out, and they're going to stay back, make sure that FrenchEmperor can't get away into this lane.
And they also obviously have the information that their own jungler, OtherTheAnother, went to right lane, right? Like, he is not available if they try to take that fight or if they step up too far, favoring instead helping out this solo lane, which can be a pretty volatile one. That tends to be the case for a lot of these mage solos where they do poke each other pretty well. Poseidon doesn't have as good of sustain as the Outwash, but obviously the Vampiric Shroud helps a good deal in that conversation. All of these mage solos, in my opinion, just seem to be kind of hanging in the balance, and it doesn't take much to tip the scales one way or the other. You put a thumb on there the right way, it could absolutely end up in the favor of one direction versus the other. Whereas this duo lane, I gotta feel like this is a much more we'll see you in 20 minutes kind of style. Heimdallr has never been a premier fighting character. Ishtar can do it herself, but definitely is comfortable just saying, we'll see you later, we'll scale up. I think this is much more likely to be where we'll see the aggression.
Bit of a fight around blue buff. FrenchEmperor wanting to go for the invade, but OtherTheAnother and Duduin both a little too quick to get to that buff, and OgiBre on the opposite side of the map. Means it will just be a normal split of the blues, normal split of the general buffs across the map. So no real early scuffles just yet, but with all of this non-fighting that has really happened, it's the Olympus Bolts who are starting to slowly pull ahead, about 400 or 500 gold, give or take, over the course of these 3 minutes. Nothing crazy at this point, but considering we've had no fighting, Lode and Dutsher have been pushed under tower almost the entire time, surprising to see that the Bolts have been able to kind of pull this small lead out here, Kaizo.
Yeah, it is. It's a wave to wave kind of situation, right? Like we haven't seen any huge invades just yet. It's really just the split in who gets which buff and then how many creeps are denied into tower. Probably the mid lane, I would estimate, is where a lot of that gold is missing for the Yomi Tanuki, just because Pikarino can't clear as quickly as something like BeroTheBeast on this Kukulkan. And Pikarino, I mean, obviously of Pikarinoob's fame, if you've been watching for a couple of years now, he definitely is one that I'm going to keep an eye on here for kind of a star player for the Yomi Tanuki, particularly on this Baba Yaga, which we saw Rapio a little earlier this morning look very good on. It's a character that kind of fell out of favor a little bit here recently. I don't really know what exactly knocked her out of the contention for that top mid lane pick, because still does everything really wants your mid laner to do, right? Like you can still itemize hybrid if you absolutely need to, has great late game scaling, excellent team fight presence, pretty safe in the early game. Something like this Kukulkan is actually a pretty analogous pick in my eyes. Doesn't have the same team fight ultimate, it's much more of an objective ult for Bero, but both of these characters are probably going to be pretty content to just hang out and then farm up for the foreseeable future, as is, of course, the EU playstyle.
Yeah, I know with Baba, she at the very least for nerfs, takes a little bit longer to stack up some of the items now. Now, I'm no mathematician. I'm not going to pretend I know how many exact stacks of the passive it takes. Pikarino, though, does lose his ult, or does lose his dash. Ult from the mid laner just off the mark, but OtherTheAnother will collapse right back in. First blood to the Olympus Bolts, and maybe another FrenchEmperor silenced out. Does have access to leap and ultimate, and is able to get away from the Olympus Bolts. That's first blood to the Chaos team.
And that's a heat check for the Olympus Bolts as well. They were trying to see how much damage they had and what they could get away with, and it looks like they're going to try to get away with the blue buff invade here. FrenchEmperor is incredibly low. AP ult for the zone. They're going to try it.
Kraken used. Calvin in the middle, plucks one, but FrenchEmperor's low. He goes back in, does land both abilities, but he gets pulled back. He can't even get up into the sky in time. OtherTheAnother turns it around. Torrent's on out, and the Olympus Bolts pick up yet another kill, and I believe the blue buff successfully stolen. All the while the Olympus Bolts are running away with the early game.
And that's tragic for the Yomi Tanuki, because Calvin does throw out the Scarab's Blessing, but unfortunately clips his own gigantic player model instead of successfully landing that one onto the FrenchEmperor. Obviously, FrenchEmperor probably doesn't make that play if he's not anticipating that Scarab's Blessing coming his way. Bit unfortunate the way that that one shakes down, but you're totally right. I mean, the result of all of that is that what was an otherwise pretty innocuous, pretty benign early game has suddenly begun to pull away in the favor of the Olympus Bolts. And they do have a composition that can look to early objective fight. I mean, the Chaac is an excellent zoning tool alongside the Opwash. They've got really good objective shred with the Ganesha ult, and obviously, as we talked about on the desk a little bit, they have the secure from that Kukulkan. If they get too much of a window, if the Yomi Tanuki aren't particularly careful with their ward coverage, if they're playing a little too lackadaisically, Olympus Bolts could rip one of these objectives pretty early.
Do you see a small grouping around gold? Maybe just trying to go for control of the Harpies more than anything, see if anybody's sticking around the side of the jungle, but no pull towards objective just yet. Lode, though, does use the Bifrost all the way from base. It's a hefty cooldown for his safety and utility to come back up, but with the way the dual lane has been going on, probably won't need it anytime soon. Small fight over shield buff. Streak and Calvin pull it. Lode trying to steal that one away. It does manage to go the way of the Bolts.
Nice.
They've just been slowly whittling away through this jungle, denying anything they can to the Bolts.
While we have a bit of downtime, J-Mac, I do want to check in with OtherTheAnother, because we mentioned, or at least Trelly did on the desk, a couple of buffs going in the direction of this Chaac. Got some additional scaling on that first ability. 5% isn't much right now, but will at least make him hit a little bit harder in the late game. Speaking of late game, Torrent is the big one. That's the teleport ability the Chaac has, the spin in a circle ability, and that one got pretty substantial buff. I mean, we're talking 40 base damage is pretty good once you get that ability to level 5. That's an ability that hits twice as well, so that's 80 damage, and it's going to be dumped out onto the Gold Fury here.
Well, Fury already down to half. Ultimate from Bero available, but might not even be needed. The Yomi Tanuki have no idea this is happening. A Kraken onto Duduin. It's going to be Aegis down. Duduin's still alive, still juking and chiving around inside the tower, but doesn't have the moves enough. A stun under FrenchEmperor into the tower. Gets a quick bat out of hell on immediate answer back. Will be able to escape. A kill for the Tanuki, but a Gold Fury for the Bolts.
And well worthwhile for the Bolts. And I feel like I said this in set number 1 as well. You can make the argument that probably your solo laner doesn't need to die for that play, but it's more the fact that despite the fact that they do, you're still pretty okay with it. Obviously, it's been a pretty long-standing tradition of too many people on one side of the map do the objective on the other. The Olympus Bolts will grab that one away. Gradually increase this lead a little bit more. We did get to see Duduin there. You called out the Aegis, I believe, which is a bit of a different look, and it makes sense against a Poseidon, right? Like, you're against Poseidon, Camazotz, you're not really using beads on anything there. Don't necessarily need to avoid any crowd control. It's just an overwhelming amount of damage that's likely coming your way if you're on the Olympus Bolts backline. Pretty CC-light composition overall, actually, for the Yomi Tanuki. That was a problem in the previous set as well, where you have this Khepri, which is very good pick initiation, grabbing one guy in an isolated jungle corridor or right before an objective fight. But once we get to the grouping stage, JMac, it's going to be a little bit more tricky for them to actually make these engagements happen.
Beads burned by StreakUp for an ultimate by Lode. He'll take that trade any day of the week. And I think, kind of going back to discussion about CC, maybe kind of talk a little bit about the scaling more than anything for the Tanuki as the game goes on. You mentioned, it's more of a pick style of comp, especially with Calvìn being on the Khepri, fairly low CC, a lot more single target style of focus. Does that make the team fighting for the Yomi Tanuki harder in the late game compared to a Bolts composition?
I would say probably. I think the dive is really, really good from the Yomi Tanuki, but might not get a chance to talk about it. Blink and ult here.
Oh, StreakUp does have the Scarab's Blessing on them. Trying to wait it out on the side of the Bolts, and they do just that. They take down Calvìn, and then StreakUp right after, all under the tier 1 tower. But now Lode is out of position. One more tower shot, doesn't even need it. It's the potion instead from Pikarino. It's going to be a kill for the Yomi Tanuki. FrenchEmperor on the way, 2 low health bars, but the Bolts should be fine under their tower to head back to base.
No, Oni Fury for another minute and 30 seconds or so means that nothing that the Tanukis can do on the back end of that dive. So trading a 2-for-1 is overwhelmingly good for the Olympus Bolts, obviously. It's unfortunate that the rotation came in from Pikarino when it did. Lode would have liked to walk away with that, but they do still quite literally get away with murder in that tower. So I think everything's mostly fine. But going back to your question, JMac, about what these team fights are going to look like, Yomi Tanuki are very, 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 very good at diving. Like, Camazotz with a Khepri ult on top of him is next to unkillable. There's not a whole lot you can do to punish him. And OtherTheAnother's doing some fighting over here.
But he's losing the 1v1 OgiBre. Lower HP, still wins that one. Can Duduin find him over the wall? Just misses with the fleeting breath, and then the corpse explosion after, off the mark. OgiBre lives, and kind of maybe a bit of a questionable pick there by OtherTheAnother. I thought maybe he had enough damage to go in, but without ultimate, that is not the easiest fight to take up against a Poseidon of all gods.
Yeah, that Trident does so incredibly much damage at melee range. It is an insane boxing tool for him, but I mean, at the same time, you can't really fault OtherTheAnother for trying it. Calvìn is not in a great spot here, gets the double ults on top of him. Lode will be the one credited with that kill. But it's hard to actually fault OtherTheAnother for trying that engagement onto OgiBre. He didn't have any tier of any physical defense online yet, goes straight into the Shogun's Kusari after that Pythagorean's piece, meaning that he's fairly squishy to something like a Chaac that would run at him in a straight line. And up until that point, OtherTheAnother was 3-0-1. He was feeling real good about himself, very far ahead. Not super surprising he went for it.
Lord.
Honestly, more surprising the damage that Pikarino's doing here.
He's just getting it for free. That was 2 potions and that first ability. FrenchEmperor snuck his way into the backline. The beacon goes over to the Bolts, but OtherTheAnother barely able to scrape by. Gets the torrent into the jungle to escape. Beacon for the Bolts, but nearly a pick for the Yomi Tanuki. Pikarino cannot go unchecked, and neither can this Gold Fury. Yomi Tanuki has started up the objective in the Bolts after taking so much damage. They can't even show up to contest. It'll be an Oni Fury now for the Yomi Tanuki. Kraken Not really necessary, but just in case, will be an objective now for Tanuki.
Celebratory ultimate there from OgiBre at the end. And you're right, they just overextended a little bit too hard for the beacon, and not necessarily the most or least impressive objective to have this early on into the game. It gives you some decent global stats that will just gradually buff your team over time, but as it pertains to immediacy and impact on the map, I think that the Oni Fury likely to be a little bit more valuable there, just because it does give you a larger gold bounty, which helps the Yomi Tanuki catch up a little bit. Means that we're probably going to go into a bit of downtime, at least until this Pyromancer spawns, J-Mac. And with the way the Yomi Tanuki have been playing, it looks like they're just going to immediately try to rip this one away. And I'm surprised that the Bolts either don't know this is happening or aren't willing to step up to it.
Dutsher's got Dharmic Pillars. Doesn't end up using it to try and steal that one away. Instead, it will be another objective for the Yomi Tanuki. Pyromancer now in the pocket of Calvìn. If we take a look at levels, though, even with some of the great fights that the Yomi Tanuki have been winning out, the objectives they've been able to get, still losing out on a couple of levels here and there, one between their hunters, solo laners as well, even the jungle falling a bit behind on the side of Tanuki. Gold, nearly 3k up for the Olympus Bolts, but the Tanuki able to at least fight back and stay afloat more than anything else. A pick on a low would be great. He doesn't have his beads for another 12 seconds. StreakUp not willing to step forward, though, in a 2v1. This is a fight I'd imagine what they want to take, but paying a bit, maybe too much respect to the Heimdallr in this case.
And it's even more surprising that they don't go in, because you look at the incredible ward coverage that the Yomi Tanuki have of the left-hand side of the jungle. We're talking 2 sentries at pretty critical locations, another couple of wards sprinkled in on the north side of the map as well. You had ample information to know that that was in fact a 1v2. I don't know if maybe StreakUp is waiting on this power spike, wants to get the dominance online before doing any kind of fighting whatsoever. And God had imagined that could have been a good opportunity for them to potentially punish Lode, who is pretty substantially far ahead here. He's the only real sizable lead on the map. It's about 2 levels. OtherTheAnother uses the beads here, but goes back in.
Uses the ultimate, catches out 2. FrenchEmperor able to jump over, but Calvìn hit by the knockup from Lode, sent through the realms, and might just be dead on arrival. Lands back in. It will be a kill for Lode. OtherTheAnother still chasing forward. He was almost dead just earlier. Now healing back up with a Dharmic Pillar nearby. It's OgiBre's got to use the bees to try and back away. It's a collapse in by the Bolts, but an ultimate from Pikarino may just be the factor that pushes the Olympus Bolts away. Nearly half health on BeroTheBeast trying to heal back up, but Pikarino standing his ground, still getting big damage on OtherTheAnother. He's nearly going to take him out by himself.
Somebody's got to notice that this guy's just doing free damage at some point. They killed him 1 time and seem to have forgotten where he is. And by the way, don't forget that Duduin was in that fight as well, chasing out FrenchEmperor all the way to the right Phoenix. Not really sure what that fight was over. A little too early for Fire Giant, not a whole lot of buffs up. Pyromancer down. Maybe fighting just for the sake of it. But the Bolts kind of come out on top of that, but they gotta keep Duduin alive.
Beads used by Duduin, still has access to Aegis if the tower dive continues, but now it's some of that health online. An ample amount of cooldown to Duduin to be able to resustain himself. I gotta say, 2 items more than anything stick out to me, and I think I want to bring it more towards the Hunters, where a lot of focus has been towards Lode. That second item, Griffin Wing, is really standing out to me right now, because that is not a traditional Hunter item that we've been seeing in the current meta.
It's not, and I will be honest, I don't think I've seen anybody that is not a Heimdallr pick up this item anytime recently. It gives you really good ability to snipe your autos around a corner when otherwise you can sort of get jerked around the corners and other objectives on the map by these players that are trying to avoid auto attacks. Makes it a little bit more reliable to sneak an auto in as they go around a corner, and also just makes it so that your damage is much more difficult to avoid. Lode has lower than average base attack speed. It gives him some decent base stats. It means that you don't have to go straight into the dominance.
OgiBre slowed down by OtherTheAnother. Dutsher showing up. Now he's stuck inside the pillars. Will stand his ground and fight back. And now it's OtherTheAnother. He's got to run, but gets stunned out by StreakUp and taken down by FrenchEmperor. Dutsher, the next one on the chopping block, but he's able to scapegoat his way out. OgiBre sent through the realms by 1, but Dutsher's not out just yet. It's FrenchEmperor trying to go for the kill, and he gets it, but it's 2 for Lode, and an extra 1, making a triple kill for the carry of the Olympus Bolts. Pikarino too late to the party. StreakUp already back to base, and yet another Fury. The Olympus Bolts get 3 plus Primal.
And OtherTheAnother baits his life perfectly, whether intentionally or not, and definitely makes all of the Yomi Tanuki collapse on him and just dump a whole bunch of resources into his body just to land that kill. In the entire time that fight was going on, J-Mac, FrenchEmperor was diving the support of all things. He did eventually get the kill onto Dutsher, but you'd think that it would have been helpful to contend with Duduin, who just walks up for free and empties the crypts into the side of that team fight and makes ample space for Lode to just stand his ground and sling as many auto attacks as necessary. You thought 2 levels was good enough for Lode. How about 3 now? Probably, I was going to say full levels, not 2.5 levels, not a level and a half. He's absolutely incredibly far ahead here, can finish off that starter item. He's a level a minute or better now. It's only 19 minutes in. He's already gotten to level 20, which means could be some early objectives on the right-hand side of the map targeted if the Olympus Bolts get an opportunity.
Ults traded by Other and Pikarino. Much more valuable of an ultimate from Pikarino in this case. Look how much damage he's already done to the jungler. OtherTheAnother might not be able to stick around for this fight. It's the Pyromancer pulled by the Bolts, nearly taken out. The Bolts able to secure it. The Kukulkan ultimate late for the secure this time around. But the damage from the Opwash, able to make sure to confirm that one. The Yomi Tanuki could just stick around. They're going to go for the Fire Giant. They recognize a lot of the secure is down on the side of the Bolts. Up to the Bolts now to try and answer back. 3 inside of the pit. Pikarino zoning on the left, but he doesn't have ultimate. And Fire Giant down to half. OtherTheAnother dives right back into the middle. A Dharmic Pillar used. OgiBre is falling low, but he can't escape the pit. He's got to die to 1. It's either the objective or the kill. It's the Yomi Tanuki. They get the Fire Giant, but OtherTheAnother has picked up a second kill of his own. And FrenchEmperor in the backline doesn't have his ultimate to escape. Lode will chase out Pikarino. A couple more shots around the wall. Should get it done. Pikarino low. 1 more hit would do, but Lode will just give up the chase, and instead the Bolts will keep pushing up mid.
They're going to grab this T1 tower. It doesn't look like anybody's going to be around for the T2 either, so that should fall in pretty short order. And the Olympus Bolts with a very veteran call there. They know that it's unlikely that they'll be able to secure the objective away from the Yomi Tanuki, so they don't even make an attempt on it. They just immediately jump onto the Tanuki, knowing that their only play is to commit to the objective, make sure that one goes down in their favor. And they do get it on what was at the time all 5 members, but the overwhelming engagement from the Bolts while that was taking place, coupled with the poke that the Yomi Tanuki were taking from the Fire Giant, just means that they didn't have the health bars required to fight back into that one. It is pretty fortunate for them that they escape with 3 Fire Giants left intact. Very notably, their ADC does still have it, so too does their mid and jungle, which means that they have decent objective damage, could go for a tower or something, but J-Mac, they got to do something with this buff, otherwise it's just not worthwhile. I mean, you lost 2 members for 0, tier 1 and tier 2 in mid opens up the map a whole bunch over there for just all kinds of activities. So much room for activities in the mid lane now. The Yomi Tanuki have to find something. A tier 1 in mid is a good start, but probably going to want a little bit more than that.
I think more than anything, it just kind of felt like a desperation play out of the Yomi Tanuki. Say, okay, well, we're going to go for Fire Giant. We don't know if we can do it, but if we do, maybe we can just keep it away from the Olympus Bolts, make sure that they at least get denied the buff more than anything else. Kind of seems to have at least been the mindset there. They were able to trade out a couple of kills all throughout there. Losing out on OgiBre, Calvìn, not the worst case for the Fire Giant. Still have it on StreakUp and Pikarino, your primary damage dealers. And one of those for towers. A pick on OtherTheAnother would be great. Uses ultimate, but it's just a zone away. Calvìn, more than anything, doesn't want to get plucked back. Bede's still down for over 20 seconds on the jungler. But the Bolts are starting to group up around Oni Fury. They might just be able to keep this fight going for themselves. Remember, no ultimate for the Chaac. Empty the crypts used. The Fury goes to the Olympus Bolts. And the fight after may just not even happen. Calvìn dashes in, but Bero immediately pops speeds and backs out.
Pops beads and Aegis and has to disengage immediately. So the chase is on here for the Yomi Tanuki, diving very deep as OgiBre can't quite catch the Kukulkan in that crack. And now, very suddenly, the Bolts want back in.
OtherTheAnother teleports back in with the Torrent, uses his beads already, and now Pikarino has used his jump. OtherTheAnother still pushing forward. The rest of his team a little bit further away from OtherTheAnother's all by himself and will get taken down by OgiBre. Great pluck from Calvìn. Make sure to get that kill, but now OgiBre and Calvìn both low. FrenchEmperor by himself in mid, further up. 1 kill for the Yomi Tanuki, but it's still an objective for the Bolts. The Tanuki really haven't done anything with his Fire Giant buff yet.
Nothing substantial anyway. Obviously, the kill onto OtherTheAnother is not nothing, but certainly not worth trading out the objective on the left-hand side of the map. Pyro is spawning, Beacon also an available point of contention. I'd like to see them fight now while Calvìn is still incredibly low. Still have a couple of Fire Giants left to strip off the map, and you do still have Bero's ult to actually secure one of these objectives. It's been a little bit late on a couple of these, but maybe a shot here.
Olympus Bolts, the Empty the Crypts keeps the Pyromancer in aggro, and then BeroTheBeast secures it with his own ultimate. An objective stolen away from the Yomi Tanuki, and the Olympus Bolts now push their lead to over 7,000 gold. An answer back from the Tanuki. Go ahead and cap the 3rd and final beacon. Guarantees that even on an immediate team fight loss, they would not lose out in this game, because, well, their Titans are going to be marching out of the base here in just a moment, heading up towards that right side with the Fire Giant respawning in just about a minute. I think maybe we'll see a fight break out around these Titans kind of pushing up.
It's not a bad idea for them to group up around there. It is going down the right lane, which means that it is at least the easiest place to defend it if you also have to do something around the FG pit. So that could give the Bolts an opportunity to group up maybe around this tier 2 tower and right, get some very early damage. And pretty often we see these teams just take out the Titan before their own gets there and use their own Titan as sort of a bargaining chip to go into the Fire Giant pit, get some good vision control, get some established dominance around that location, and potentially try to burst it down while the enemy team is contending with their Titan. Could be on the cards. It does look like the Bolts are going for some form or fashion of that play as everybody is beginning to congregate around the right side of the map, J-Mac. I'm really looking at the Yomi Tanuki to stake their claim here. It's been a gradual decline for them throughout this game. A couple of sparks of brilliance, but if they lose this next fight, I feel like this is the most critical one for them to come out on top of. Everything up until this point has been pretty whatever, but this is the first real 5-on-5 team fight that matters.
Do you see Bero start to get some damage on the Titan immediately? StreakUp, trying to get some snipe shots on Duduin, but it's Empty the Crypts used Calvìn. He's lost a 1/3 of his health bar immediately. OtherTheAnother and FrenchEmperor spot themselves out in the jungle. Healing is there for OtherTheAnother. Save for FrenchEmperor, but it's the Camazotz that jumps out. The Olympus Bolts still pushing forward. Dutsher pulled back by Calvìn, and an ultimate from OtherTheAnother catches out too. The revive is good to keep Calvìn alive. Dutsher nearly goes down. FrenchEmperor going to chase him out and make sure that the support falls. Maybe a second one for FrenchEmperor. Does get the double kill before trading out his life. Now 1 kill for Lode. It's a 3 versus 4, but now it's 3 versus 3, and Lode falls down. OtherTheAnother there. Duduin gonna try and do it all by himself. Double kill for the Puch, and now Other is taking his way back into the fight. Pikarino is low. Duduin's got the cooldowns to keep this fight going. The damage is there. It's a triple kill off the stun from Duduin, and maybe another on the StreakUp. He catches him on the back. Duduin's gonna get a quadra kill to end out this team fight. 4 for the Olympus Bolts solo laner, and the Titan marches down right. Phoenix will be the next answer after. Not sure if they can end, but a great fight for the Olympus Bolts.
Absolute insanity at the end of that fight. It should have been a victory for the Yomi Tanuki, but Duduin makes magic happen. His only 4 kills, by the way, this entire game in that one engagement. And if you've been wondering, why are so many people picking up Puch? What is so good about this character now that we haven't seen up until this point? That last team fight should tell you everything you need to know. Incredible space control with the Empty the Crypts. You have to respect that. You absolutely will never win a team fight if you are fighting inside of Empty the Crypts, especially after they made it so that those bodies pass through players, can hit a whole bunch of people now. And then the incredible sustain that comes out of this character. If you just throw the bodies out, don't even explode them, just pick them up, reducing your cooldowns, healing you up, giving you procs on that Divine Ruin, that Typhon's Fang healing, the Pythags healing, Blood-Soaked Shroud as well. I mean, it is absolutely insane that he got away with that.
He's going to get away with this, too. 3 people around him. FrenchEmperor nearly taken down, able to get to the bat out of hell fast enough to escape. It's OtherTheAnother to the backline, finds through with the ultimate, but pulls the ult from StreakUp in response. Now chasing out OgiBre. Pluck from Calvìn, going to be responded by the Bolts, nearly takes him down. And BeroTheBeast just clips OgiBre with that Serpent of the Nine Winds. Going to send 2 back to base. The Olympus Bolts can go right for the Fire Giant. 3 Runic Bombs in pocket. Might not have the ultimate for secure, but 3k damage on field might just be enough. Pikarino and StreakUp want to try and steal this one away, but it will go to the Olympus Bolts. Fire and all. Kraken hits Dutsher, but it's not going to do any damage to him. Load, Bifrost out. And Yomi Tanuki going to keep up their chase, but StreakUp's taking a bit too much damage. The Bolts making out just fine. In fact, StreakUp gets taken down. I think a straight tornado may have caught him or something. The Olympus Bolts not expecting a kill. They'll take one with fire.
StreakUp like trips on a ladybug or something and somehow manages to find a death in that one. I didn't even see him take any damage in that engagement. But the Olympus Bolts have definitely done the damage here to the Fire Giant, and once again, it's just off the back of Duduin. They dump so many resources into trying to poke him out. He just walks back up, and then there's nothing they can do about stepping into that pit. Bero, once again, has incredible damage on these objectives. No ultimate even necessary to dissuade the rest of the Yomi Tanuki. And it was a good effort from the members that did show up to try to defend. I mean, it was incredibly close, but you're kind of rolling the dice at that point. But that's what happens, J-Mac, when you get this far behind. Your best opportunities are coin flips at best, and now the Bolts want the bird.
Dharmic Pillars and Empty the Crypts both used by the Bolts, but it's all just a guarantee that they can go for this left side Phoenix. The response for Tanuki is, well, I don't want to stand in this death field. So we're going to back away from that one. It cost them a bird. Now the Olympus Bolts grouping up kind of awkwardly throughout the jungle. Thought maybe they'd head towards the mid-bird, but not having EFG means it's a little bit harder to go for that siege, and well, with minions pushed so far back, not able to go that direction. So 2 Phoenixes now down on the side of the Yomi Tanuki, but the Bolts can go back and spend up some of their hard-earned gold and finish up some of these builds.
And it is the builds that I want to actually direct our attention to. We checked in with OtherTheAnother pretty early on to see what he was going, and it looked like, you know, normal assassin stuff. You got a Jotun's Wrath. The Erendite is perhaps a bit exotic, but J-Mac, it got weird toward the end here. This rune-breaking hammer is, for my money, per gold you spend, one of the best, if not the best, assassin items in the game right now. It gives you a decent amount of sustain, it gives you a decent amount of survivability with the HP, and then sunders enemies that are nearby and essentially horrific emblems them as well, increasing the damage they take, decreasing the damage they deal. And when you combine that with the Phalanx, with the Eye of the Jungle, with the Talisman of Energy, OtherTheAnother is basically just a solo laner that does way too much damage right now. There's so overwhelmingly much utility here, they gotta find a check for him soon.
Fire minions pushing up right bird. Olympus Bolts pushing up mid themselves. OtherTheAnother behind everybody, and a Kraken already used. FrenchEmperor's missed all of his damage in the backline, and so it might just be another Phoenix for the Bolts. It's low, but hasn't gone down just yet. OtherTheAnother going to use his ultimate to make sure he can stay in the fight. Swooping along the backlines, it's FrenchEmperor in the bat out of hell, but he's got to dip out immediately. Dutsher is low, but OtherTheAnother has now run into FrenchEmperor trying to body block, but maybe it's the other way around. Stuck in a fight with the Camazotz. Quick blink away. We'll make sure that the chase is over on the left side of the map. Olympus Bolts have swept the 2 healthy Phoenixes off. Right side, back up, respawn, and resustaining itself. Olympus Bolts, they got exactly what they wanted for. No deaths on their side, plus the bird.
And they played it cleanly too, right? Like Duduin just walks up and drops Empty the Crypts, and nobody wants to stand anywhere near that cooldown, which gives OtherTheAnother the perfect engagement route through the back end of the Phoenix, can just walk in and start smacking it. And frankly, J-Mac, somebody I think should have probably stopped him, considering he was tanking it at one point. He stopped DPS to ult at one point, but nobody wants to walk near this Chaac while he's got that ultimate available. And they do manage to get the bird without giving up any kills. And part of that is, I talked about this earlier this morning, the way that mage solos function. you don't have anybody else really diving with you anymore if you're a jungler when you have this mage solo. TheFrenchEmperor has nobody to assist him when he starts to go for these kills in the backline. If, as you call out, he misses Vampire Bats, he misses that echolocation ability, either one of those cooldowns are missed, you no longer have sufficient damage to land a kill onto a backliner. The math does not math like that. So as soon as TheFrenchEmperor doesn't execute perfectly, because OgiBre's on a mage and he's in the backline with the rest of his team, TheFrenchEmperor is kind of on an island, and he does manage to get some value after the fact and plays distraction more than anything else, but at the end of the day, nobody else is doing the damage to Bero, nobody's doing the damage to Lode. It gives them quite a lot of space to work with.
And speaking of damage, I'm glad that you brought up Lode. Topping the charts for the team without a crit build. This isn't a crit Heimdallr where even though he crits, it does reduce damage. This is just straight up damage dealing power pen shred that Lode has gone for his build, and he is making it work great. Kraken hits 2, nearly takes out Duduin, but immediate Serpentine wins will push Calvìn away from this team fight. Duduin going to be able to resustain the jungle thanks to the benefit of that Puch. The Olympus Bolts nearly losing out on one of their own. Send Calvìn back to base. Can reset though. Fire Giant back up on the map, and a Runic Bomb in hand for some secure. Olympus Bolts so slow on this one. It's only OtherTheAnother doing damage to it and tanking it up. Not the best idea. TheFrenchEmperor steps around the side, but takes a bit of damage himself.
They gotta go for this, though. They've got Poseidon left. Khepri just now got here. They have to stick this.
Fire Giant's low, 25%. Calvìn and StreakUp are going to try and take down one. They do take out Dutsher. OtherTheAnother low, but able to teleport back away. Blinks past TheFrenchEmperor yet again. Fire Giant does manage to go to the Olympus Bolts throughout all of that. It does go to the damage from Duduin to secure that one. Pikarino up in the house, but now he's surrounded by the Olympus Bolts. Ultimate for OtherTheAnother catches TheFrenchEmperor, gets the beads, and an ult from Bero saves his jungler's life. It's a killing spree for the mid laner. Calvìn low, Calvìn and StreakUp both out. This one, OgiBre walks in the middle of everybody, resustaining quite a bit, but not enough damage in response. Duduin takes down StreakUp. A 5th kill now for the solo laner, and OgiBre's surrounded, gets dropped by Lode. Calvìn, the only one left alive on his team, but the minions are pouring into the base down mid. Calvìn might not even get a chance to go back and save his Titan or stop this game. The Olympus Bolts can march it down and take game 1.
It is a victory lap here for the Olympus Bolts, who take a shaky looking fight, honestly. They were pretty slow to pick that one up. As you mentioned, it was only OtherTheAnother at first that was dealing the damage to that one, and I think that, yeah, they do have to go back for the bird here, which does buy them a bit of time, but actually, I don't know, J-Mac. Can they can surely do this.
Well, they got Lode. He's got his full build. Still 7 seconds. The Olympus Bolts will go ahead and clean this one up. A couple seconds late to getting there before that Phoenix goes back up, but at the end of the day, able to pull themselves out a win here for game 1.
And the FG fight was, again, a little bit scary just because of how slow they were on the draw. They picked it up a little bit late, but fortunately, OgiBre spends an incredible amount of time in the left lane, and they also had Khepri just coming back from base, so had the man advantage for quite a bit there and managed to not only secure the objective, but bait the rest of the Yomi Tanuki to dive a little bit too deep. Excellent pincer maneuver there to end out the game.
Yeah, I got to give some highlights to Duduin as well on the Opwash. Bit of a slower early game, but that quadra kill for himself really turned things back around for his team. And then his play around the Fire Giant, great. Olympus Bolts take game number 1. We'll take it to a quick break, though, and we'll come back with game number 2.
That's right. Now you too can get the flavor of whatever Cthulhu's dreams taste like, I guess, which is raspberry acai. You can go pick that up at advance.gg. Of course, you can also get a really, really cool shaker that comes with it. I stand by the fact that anything that has Cthulhu on it brand-wise just inherently is a really cool item. And this tends to provide to that, right? Both the tub, the tin, whatever you want to call it, that the flavor comes in for Cthulhu's Dream as well as the cup itself. You can go to advance.gg/smite, pick that up, as well as any of the other flavors and stuff. But right now, Cthulhu's Dream is what it's all about. And it's a dream that I don't want to say you'll never want to wake up from, because that sounds really menacing.
But if you don't want to wake up from it, it's good.
But yeah, it's tasty is what I'm trying to say. It's Gourt's Chelly, and it is the Bolts Chelly with a 1-0 lead. After a pretty damn hard-fought game, it was not easy. I mean, at any point, either of these teams felt like they were just one step away from winning.
It seemed to me like the Bolts took control. They sort of, they fumbled for a second, and then, I was very impressed with the outwash. I think Duduin had a fantastic performance, and hurts me to say this, but OtherTheAnother on the jungle. Not because I dislike OtherTheAnother, because I've always been against the Chaac jungle, right? But I think maybe these buffs were exactly what the doctor ordered, because Chaac was absolutely chunking not only the damage, but just how slippery he was, right? There was a lot of moments where OtherTheAnother seemed dead. There was like no way he was going to be able to make it out. Teleports, comes back in, does some damage, teleports out again. Just the amount of juke shoes that Chaac can provide, especially late game when you have a pretty tanky build like OtherTheAnother had. It looked real solid. So I'm thinking, if I had to pick one god to take away, definitely the outwash over the Chaac, but somehow you got to be able to lock down the OtherTheAnother, because this man was just zooming all over the place, like an Ares or something, some way to lock him down, cripple him, make sure he can't use that escape, because it was ridiculous.
And you got to talk about the duality of a bottom two, right? Chaac jungle, which is something that we don't see highly prioritized to the point where most people don't run it, versus the Opwash, which was also in the bottom two for the Bolts. They managed to get away with a whole ton there. And again, it looks great. It was not the easiest game in the world, but like you said, when you're getting a quadra kill on an Opwash, things tend to be going well for you. And of course, if your jungle looks that good, then the stars are aligning. So the Bolts get away with a good draft, and like you said, maybe there's some stuff to change. I just saw Santa go by in the background. And of course, we'll have to see how exactly these two teams adapt to that, and specifically how the Tanuki adapt to that, if they want to stay afloat early on in this engagement for them. So a little bit of pressure on. And really, I do think a lot, like you said, banning Chaac, probably not the way to go unless you really think it was that big of an issue. Maybe picking around it. But the Opwash, especially since it got through all 10 bans. That's the thing that really blew me away, was the fact that it got through all 10 bans. We'll see if it can do it again here as we jump into game 2. Tanuki will remain the first pick team. Outside of those 2 picks, is there anything that you think needed to change dramatically?
I mean, the Tanuki could prioritize getting themselves the Heimdallr as well. I think that would be a big deal. Lode looked fantastic on the Heim, top damage in the game. You know, very high kill count as well. So if you didn't want to deal with that, which the Tanuki clearly didn't, they're just going to take it away. I was going to say grab it for yourself, but maybe they don't value that pick so much, and they definitely don't want Lode to get his hands on it. So the Heim will not make it through. And of course, the Owlpwash as well was where I was going, right? Both of those picks will not see the light of day, so the Olympus Bolts are going to have to change up at least a good portion of their draft so far. Emoja wasn't picked anyway, so that's not going to be too big of a deal. But it will be the Poseidon going to the Tanuki once again, and the Olympus Bolts say, hey, if you're giving us the Cuckoo, we're going to take it.
Yeah, grab that. They immediately go for the Daji, which is one. Daji has been a very interesting just jungler in general, it feels like, Charlie, because it feels like a lot of the time we're seeing her roll it back a year and some change, and she's literally running games first ban against some teams in the SPL. Then it felt like, oh, do they not have CC immunity? Okay, cool, let's lock in Daji. She was the counter pick. So this high up, it's kind of interesting to see her that highly prioritized.
I'd say so. When it's just the Poseidon, right? That's the only CC immunity you see. And of course, locked in right after is the Aphrodite. So not just you have to worry about Magi's or Absolutions and of course the Poseidon beads. Now you got to add Undying Love to the mix. Daji's job just got a heck of a lot harder. Throw the Kukulkan into the mix as well. That burst ultimate could also get immune. So I like the defensive play of grabbing this Aphrodite this early on for the Tanuki. Plus, you get Thor, you get Poseidon. Those are also just 2 top-tier selections. So I'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah, Raijin gets locked in. So you've got some high-quality picks, I think, on your side as well. For me, the question is going to be, where does the Afro go? We've seen it a lot in support. And we have seen it giveth and take away as well. So we'll have to see where it lands. And so far, it's looking a lot like it's going to be support. Anhur locked in, which when the Heimdallr's been banned, and, you know, Hachi, again, has been high priority, but we were having that conversation a little bit ago. That duality that is the Hunter picks right now, where it's like, Ishtar, you could tell me she's number 2. You could make a good argument. I'd probably believe you. The same thing for the Anhur. Same thing for Hachi. Same thing for, like, Rom, who was really high prioritized by some of the SPL teams. And so not surprised to see him. I am surprised to see the Janus, of all things. It feels like we haven't seen him in a hot minute.
Yeah, but it has been a while. And I know in Ranked in particular, the 3 that have been, because you get 5 bans now, and you can ban the same god as the other team because you ban at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like Thoth, Janus, and the Kukulkan. One of them gets banned every time, and I like playing all those gods, so I'm like, why is it that all these gods that use Book of Thoth so well are so strong? Because that's just a great start at the moment. The Vamp Shroud style build has gotten some nerfs, so the flat pen early damage burst mages are good, and Janus is certainly one of them.
Well, it's a squishier team comp, but the Tanuki are going to try to tie things up here. We'll see if the Bolts can solidify their lead, find themselves a win here by jumping down to the casters and watching game 2.
That's right. Thank you so much. We get ready to jump into game number 2 here between the Tanuki and the Bolts. JMX still joined by Kaizo as we get ready to jump into our second game. But not just a squishy comp, Kaizo. Looking over at what was drafted, a very slippery composition. Gods like Janus, Thor, even throwing in this Poseidon for the Tanuki. These are gods that are really hard to lock down. Gods with a lot of movement speed and a lot of ways to be able to kind of slip through these team fights.
And Calvìn on the Aphrodite just augments all of that, right? Like, she is the epitome of making a character that is not ordinarily slippery and has no lubrication whatsoever immediately feel like somebody's just greased them up and then you can't grab them anymore. I mean, you want to try to lock down OgiBre when he's got additional movement speed, another pair of beads, Aegis, so like, it's almost impossible to kill anybody that's going to be linked to Calvìn. And I think that a lot of that is going to come down to OtherTheAnother pairing with either one of these 2 mages, Duduin jumping in to help him out, or alternatively, Bero getting a good tornado off where it matters the most. Somebody's going to need to help him this time around. I think that last time TheFrenchEmperor struggled a lot, being the solo diver in particular in the late game. This time, OtherTheAnother is likely to be the guy that needs even more help than TheFrenchEmperor did last time.
And I do want to bring up at least a little bit of what Trelly was talking on the desk was kind of this Book of Thoth style of build that we might be seeing from the Janus, already going into it immediately with that Conduit gem as well. So very interested to see where Pikarino kind of goes with the build. And Janus always has kind of felt like that one mage that really doesn't build a lot of what the traditional mages go. You know, when everybody says, okay, we're going to go Book of Thoth, this next, Janus goes, what if I just do none of that? What if I just build full cooldown and just do my own thing? And it kind of feels like we get a lot of player expression, not just in the god, but also in the build for this god.
For sure. I think that Janus is in that conversation. I think the premier example would be Nemesis, where you've got Burst Nem, Tank Nem, Auto Attack Nem. Janus is definitely in the same vein, though, where because you get the inherent percent penetration now on the ultimate ability as you level that one up, you're not locked into building X item in X slot anymore. You can go for, realistically, whatever you want to, and as long as it's got power, as long as it's got cooldown, you're probably doing pretty all right. I think that more often than not, we see Book of Thoth into some kind of cooldown, whether that's Spear of Desolation, Chronos Pendant, Staff of Mirrodin, whatever it may be, and then insert Soul Reaver or another cooldown item here, and then you're pretty much good from that point. You could build like 2 Relic Daggers after that point and still be pretty satisfied with the way that your build ends up and still be doing some pretty relevant damage and having some good utility for your team.
Invade towards blue buff now for the Olympus Bolts. Duduin gonna pull it back. OgiBre gonna try and go for the secure, but instead it's a fight from OtherTheAnother. Immediately has to back away from the Kraken as FrenchEmperor jumps in with that hammer, able to get out for the time being, so no invade on that blue buff, but instead it will be Olympus Bolts just heading back to their own, make sure to secure it for themselves.
It's worth a shot from the Olympus Bolts, right? And they also force out the Kraken, which means that not only is Duduin a little bit safer, but if they do get another rotation going in that direction, might not need it, actually, dumping out the damage onto OgiBre.
Oh, he misses the last hit, though. Needed one more. Maybe instead of fight over into a lane, Lode stunned out by StreakUp. Calvìn able to walk away for the time being. But the Yomi Tanuki get out of a couple of tight situations. Janus ultimate from Pikarino may now be the initiation for Calvìn to go back in. Without ultimates from the dual lane, that might be it, but FrenchEmperor with a dive in does pull beads from the Hunter. Lode now without his relic.
That was scary for FrenchEmperor. Like, that could have gone real bad because Lode immediately uses beads and doesn't jump away, which is whenever you get ganked by a jungler, that's usually what you anticipate is going to happen, is use beads, use some kind of defensive tool. Lode uses beads and then tries to impale him into the tower. And because FrenchEmperor threw the hammer, if Lode catches him there, that is first blood in favor of the Olympus Bolts. Fortunately for FrenchEmperor, he doesn't manage to land that one, but that could have gone real bad, J-Mac.
Could have been bad for time. Do you see Olympus Bolts still keeping up that aggression? You have an Anhur, you have a Xing, great gods that want to be able to box, try and get their damage, get that CC out there, and when you have OtherTheAnother nearby, it's a blink in from Dutsher, see if he can pull the ultimate, pull beads, anything, does get beads away from Calvìn. Now OtherTheAnother's response is just gonna have to be damage up to the sky to pal out. Will pull back, StreakUp, but not enough damage. Follow-up instead. It's a turn back around. FrenchEmperor is on the scene, and he picks up a response kill for his own. Stun on the Dutsher. Still needs an edge from hammer or spin. Might have to freehand the double tap, but a jump by Dutsher is good. Spin is there, and FrenchEmperor gets the kill, but nearly trades his life. The tower's not enough. Yomi Tanuki pick up 2 and only lose OgiBre on the opposite side.
Wow, that was so smart from them, too. StreakUp doesn't use beads or ult on the dodgy ult, recognizing that he is in no danger with the rest of the squad coming in, just tanks that one down and returns fire after the fact. And that looked really good from the Olympus Bolts. I mean, you could see the idea was Dutsher goes in first, forces beads, forces the Afro ult out of Calvìn, and then OtherTheAnother cleans up with the powwow after the fact, but it just took them a little bit too long, and the entire time that they're hunting down Calvìn, StreakUp is returning the damage, backing out, baiting them deeper into the teeth of their team. Yomi Tanuki just happened to be on the scene at the perfect moment. That's one of the core competencies of this Janus, is its ability to rotate the map, but hang on, FrenchEmperor gets hit by the Spirit of the Nine Winds.
Does walk back into it, and now will go down immediately after, trying to go for a little bit of damage, trying to maybe steal that blue buff away, but unsuccessful in doing so. Loses his life immediately after. So what's the response from the Yomi Tanuki? Seems for now it's just going to be go for these mid-harpies. With a nearly tied-up game, only about 1,000 gold separating the two squads. No Gold Fury yet to be had for either of them either, as it's really only just recently spawned back in. But we're starting to see, and maybe I wonder how the progression of the game goes for OtherTheAnother and Dutsher, because these are two gods that will ruin your beads. If you don't have beads, you're praying that one of these two don't show up. We didn't get to really see that fully on display on the left side because beads did get used by Calvìn, did have the ultimate but didn't use it afterwards. The amount of threat that the Bolts just have on beads in general seems like it's going to be so tough for Tanuki to deal with.
And it is going to be probably Calvìn that's going to be on the receiving end of the brunt of that aggression, because he is the biggest target. Not only is he the most valuable member to take down on the Yomi Tanuki so that he can't provide that safety to somebody else, he also lacks mobility, which nobody else does, and they're going to go for him again here.
Does try and get some damage, but Blink now used by Dutsher. TheFrenchEmperor returned to the left side of the map. Gets the stun, the double tap right afterwards to get a little bit of damage, but already starting to get some of those tank stats. That's that HP 5 more than anything for the Xing Chen, just keeping Dutsher nice and healthy in the lane. Grouping, though, for the shield buff still. Not going to see any real fight break out just yet. The death on OgiBre on that right side of the map really did slow down the momentum, at least that the Yomi Tanuki were able to kind of pull themselves for on the left side.
The Olympus Bolts. I'm taking a look at the builds, as you mentioned, that they're getting the items online. Gauntlet of Thebes is usually the premier pickup for a lot of these supports. I don't think that I've seen a build recently that didn't just start out with that item, but thing is, JMac, that does make you a target until that item is finished up. You are not particularly tanky with 20 stacks of Gauntlet of Thebes. You're getting there, obviously, but not quite at that general frontline presence just yet. And Aphro is a character that very, very susceptible in the early game, as we've seen the Olympus Bolts trying to lean on that, to provide some pressure to the dual lane to punish her in the early. But that late game that's a cash out for an Aphrodite player. You get so much mobility, so much utility to provide to your team. You link up to something like OgiBre that ordinarily shouldn't be able to dive particularly deep just because he is a mage and needs to hybridize his build a little bit, but once he's got Calvìn giving him additional sustain, movement speed, damage amplification, healing, beads, Aegis, I mean, it sounds like I'm making this up when I say it all like this, but these are all things that Calvìn can provide, and holy crap, that was a lot of damage onto OtherTheAnother.
Yeah, he realized just what a Janus can do, even with only item and a half online at this point. Collapse towards Lode, he'll jump back towards the tower. Dutsher shows up, just to provide a bit of backup for his dual lane. But I kind of want to talk, a bit more about this Aphrodite. When we think of Afro and compositions that revolve around the Aphrodite, you think it's Afro plus who? Who is that Aphrodite going to be linked towards in the mid game, in the late game to kind of act as that hyper carry for the squad? Doesn't really feel like there's a clear target for the Yomi Tanuki that Calvìn really kind of needs to or would prefer to stick to when it comes to these late game fights.
And you're totally right about that, and there's really two different kinds of Aphrodite picks. There's the kind you're mentioning where it's like Aphrodite Susan, and then you just burst one person down an overwhelming amount of CC and damage. And then you've got Aphro as a defensive resource against something like OtherTheAnother, who is doing some nefarious stuff behind this tower and should probably back up as the rest of the team comes in. But Calvìn here isn't an aggression tool. He's not intended to be an initiator in this composition. He's only there to make sure that whoever gets gone on by OtherTheAnother, whoever gets attempted to be smothered by Dutsher and Duduin, has that a bit of additional safety in order to get themselves away. If it buys Pikarino enough time to get through the wall, or FrenchEmperor enough time to get a hammer off, StreakUp to dash away, mount up the horse, that's essentially what Calvìn is designed to do in this composition. It's really the same way that you would pick Geb if you're against a Fenrir. Well, you want to cleanse the Ragnarok ultimate for whoever gets picked up. This is the same gist where whoever is getting CC'd by OtherTheAnother's Powwow or Dutsher's Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, immediately Undying Love, and then you don't have to waste a much more valuable resource on that.
Beads available for everybody on the side of Tanuki. Good stun from Calvìn. Stops OtherTheAnother in his tracks, but it's a dunk from FrenchEmperor. The combo takes down the jungler, and Dutsher nearly gets taken out by the Lovebirds right after Calvìn with one of his own. And StreakUp to the backline. Bero has got nowhere left to go. Stunned by the wall. Beads Aegis down, but he's just getting battered around by the Yomi Tanuki. Double kill for the support and 3 total for the Yomi Tanuki. Cost them absolutely nothing. They might even just pick up an extra Fury while they're at it.
Yeah, nobody to play defense. Lode is unlikely to step across 7 or so wards that the Yomi Tanuki have on this side of the jungle to try to contest by himself. And you want to talk about what the Yomi Tanuki's draft is intended to do, because we've mentioned Olympus Bolts, lots of CC. We've made that pretty clear at this point. Yomi Tanuki's draft is designed around rotating the map and playing the surprise element. You get dunked on unexpectedly by FrenchEmperor, Pikarino suddenly emerges from a wall and takes away 900 of your HP from all the way across the map. It's very difficult to play around that. These semi-globals are good when you get one of them, because you can swing the numbers in your favor, you can be unanticipated. You start to put a couple of them together, it can be tremendously difficult to deal with, as Bero, a little wide on that ult.
Yeah, speaking of difficult to deal with, maybe difficult to lock down, has been Pikarino on this Janus. He's already got a pretty hefty damage output. Cooldown now up and available to him with the Chronos Pendant. But a beacon will go over to the Olympus Bolts, despite Pikarino being first one on that platform. Now gives the Olympus Bolts a little bit of fight back, but I think the biggest concern I have for the Bolts right now is that's the second time that FrenchEmperor has pulled a play like that. It might just be a third, but the only ward on this left side of the map is the one that Lode placed at the top side of the Fury Pit. It's almost kind of the classic. You're playing against a Thor, you're playing against anybody with semi-global. You want to have wards on the map, and there's just none of them to protect the side of the Olympus Bolts. They make it look easy in mid. A kill on OgiBre would be great, but a fast beads get him out into Duduin's ultimate. It's just out of range. OgiBre lives, mid laner Bero falls, and FrenchEmperor, he's back for a little bit more damage. Tier 1 tower gone. Another stun out. The spin is there. Beads in time, and it's a kill for FrenchEmperor all by himself. OgiBre gonna try and keep him alive as Duduin Thunder crashed in. But now it might just be a turn back onto the Poseidon. OgiBre's used everything that he's gotten in Kid, and it's a crash back in by Duduin. Whirlpool is there, but the Raijin damage is too much. 1-for-1 trade on the right side.
Duduin just does not take damage, and he has an infinite amount of cooldown on this character, just like he did on the Op Wash. The core difference, of course, being he gets a more relevant movement tool that allows him to catch up to anybody else and make sure OgiBre does end up going down there. It was worth a shot from FrenchEmperor to help out there. He does land the kill onto OtherTheAnother, obviously, but unfortunate OgiBre is a casualty of that one, and that actually does open up the Olympus Bolts to grab this Pyromancer on the right-hand side as everybody from the Yomi Tanuki went back to base, had to go spend some gold, get some health bars refreshed. And J-Mac, despite all the theatrics, I mean, this has been a much more exciting game than I think we've seen for most of the day from the EU. It's actually very, very even here. We're talking like neither one of these teams really with a substantial lead. I think that just gradually begins to favor the Yomi Tanuki as this game presses on. Don't forget that their worst stage of the game was when this Aphrodite is so vulnerable. They're susceptible to being smothered by a Duduin, OtherTheAnother, Dutsher combining and just jumping on top of you. Now that Calvin's got some defense online, you've got a significant amount of cooldown for Pikarino to help with the utility and movement of the team. I think they're already over the hurdle of this is our worst stage of the game, and probably going to start coming into their own, even though this game is relatively balanced for the time being.
At a staff of Mirrodin now for Pikarino. I mean, I swear, every time I see somebody fall through a portal, the default slap sound effect just plays in my mind because it's instantly 60-70% of their health gone just from this one player. Gotta keep eyes on this Janus, which is much easier said than done. We've already talked about a lot of the lack of vision that the Bolts have been having over in this left jungle. It's given FrenchEmperor essentially free reign on this side of the map. And then you just take how difficult it is to keep track of a Janus in general with his low cooldowns in the portals. You do see movement over towards the left side. Fury spawns in. Dutsher falls through portal. Not nearly as much damage to him, but Lode's got to jump over the wall. because he's taking 60% of his
Emperor.
health. Jump in by StreakUp and an ultimate dunk in. Lode just gets taken down in an instant, but another turns back one. Gets FrenchEmperor, tries to pull back StreakUp, but beads keep him alive. Dutsher gonna throw him right back into the tower, but he will not go down just yet. Instead, it's Calvìn taking it up like the good support to keep his carry alive. Pikarino, though, misses on the unstable vortex, and it should be the end of the fight with OgiBre now showing up. Yomi Tanuki trade out 1 for 2.
Duduin is making his way over here. He's by himself, but he does have reasonable damage even despite that fact. Pikarino will hang out over here and left and have to contend with Dutsher. It is very possible Duduin could land this kill onto Pikarino. They don't seem to know he's here.
I think Duduin was hoping that he'd walk through that portal. Instead, Thunder crashes of his own volition. Calvìn, though, doesn't have the ultimate damage from Pikarino through the wall. OgiBre showing back up, but that is a level 17 Raijin, fairly tanky in his own right. Yomi Tanuki empty-handed on the follow-up fight after. Fury still not started. It seems like the fight might not start, or might not stop, as every single time we pan over, somebody else from Yomi Tanuki is walking forward.
Tanukis do have the sustain to keep this kind of elongated engagement going, and they will actually use that sustain and drop a Kraken down on top of the Primal Fury, so they finally nab an objective for themselves at the end of that lengthy engagement. And to go back to what happened near that tower, it was frames away from Calvìn keeping the French Emperor alive through that dive. He drops the kiss onto French Emperor, goes for the Undying Love to immune out the damage that would have killed him. Unfortunately, just a little bit behind the curve of what was necessary to preserve the life of the jungler. Still manages to make a couple of pretty critical plays in that one. I mean, it's very difficult to point to a support and say, here's a mechanically intensive play that they made. It's much more big brain, small muscles from support players, tanking up the T2 tower to not only allow Pikarino to blink in, finish off OtherTheAnother, but also make sure that StreakUp can actually live through getting Xing 10 ulted into the tower in front of a mage and almost land the kill onto him as well. Shoutouts to Calvìn and shoutouts to supports everywhere for making the job a little bit easier for everybody else.
Do give credits over to Duduin, though, in this game at the very least, trying to keep his team afloat, the only one ahead, or even at this point, compared to the rest of the squad. Tanuki do get another Pyromancer, or I should say get a Pyromancer for themselves, and they've gone to the fire. They did this in game number 1 when they were behind. Now, at a slight state of ahead, they're going to try and pull this one out. Fire Giant down to half HP. The Olympus Bolts slowly funneling their way in. Pikarino trying to zone away. The jungler does do so, but portals away and instantly gets punished for it. Can't get to the powwow in time. 79 wins just off the mark. It's FrenchEmperor in the sky, right to the back line with Pikarino. BeroTheBeast dunked on by FrenchEmperor. Uses the hammer to teleport out, and Pikarino to finish the kill. Killing spree for the mid laner. He's just hanging out, cruising along the back line as he keeps pumping out damage for the Yomi Tanuki.
2 for 0 at the end of that one, and all the while Lode was not present in that engagement, pushing out the left lane, does manage to grab tier 2 tower over there in left, and the Olympus Bolts do at least prevent the Yomi Tanuki from nabbing the FG, so not the end of the world necessarily. Could have gone much worse for them, but probably not particularly thrilled with the way things went either. Beads being missing for Bero is a pretty crucial one for me, though, J-Mac, because that means anytime they want to step up around this objective, they got to be so protective of this Kukulkan. If he's even alive in time to help defend, Pikarino very deep here.
Pikarino, though, doesn't have the safety from his relics this time. Taken out by another, but FrenchEmperor in the sky looking for his target. But instead, we'll head back to the rest of his team. A quick pick for the Olympus Bolts on an maybe overzealous Pikarino just meandering through the jungle on enemy territory. Now net the Bolts. A little bit of advantage heading over towards this fire, and they're going to start it up.
They are going to grab this one, or at least try to. Pikarino's dead for 25. Spirit of the Nine Winds is great secure, but is it good enough?
Fire's already at half. Has been, looks like, be reset over towards the Olympus Bolts. OgiBre being collapsed on Kraken, hits Lode, but OtherTheAnother takes down OgiBre. That's 2 away from the Yomi Tanuki. And a blink ult to the backline from Dutsher, gets an ultimate off of Calvìn, and both relics from StreakUp, who's now already used his mounted archery to bail away from the fight. Olympus Bolts went out on another big team fight. Now only Pikarino with 4 relics active.
And StreakUp just dumps the entire load on top of that team fight. Uses the beads, uses Aegis, Undying Love, mounted archery, all in the course of about 10 seconds. And That's the worst case scenario when you have an Aphrodite is you don't get value out of any of those cooldowns because you use a similar ability at the same time. If you're Beads Aegising with Undying Love active, something doesn't add up there. You have absolutely wasted one cooldown. And now the Olympus Bolts are back over here, JMac. French Emperor does have ult, but it's already half HP.
BeroTheBeast holding on to his as well. French Emperor gets to the sky, but Fire Giant's down to 20. French Emperor goes back in, and Ultimate's used early. The Yomi Tanuki able to steal the one away, and the French Emperor takes down Bero before he inevitably trades his life out, but Calvìn picks off OtherTheAnother. Now 4 versus 3, only losing out on the jungler, who was almost dead by the time that even kicked off. The Yomi Tanuki, a great steal from them, or maybe more than anything, a misplay from Bero too early on the ultimate.
And they're walking away, the Yomi Tanuki, that is more than satisfied with the way that went. Not only trading 1 for 2, but also stealing away the FG. And you're right, I mean, Bero has the best secure on the map, or at least the most reliable secure. It's just off the mark on the timing. It did look like something messed up in the communications and the damage output from the Olympus Bolts. I think that it's more likely than not that French Emperor dunking into the FG pit stalled out the damage, and whatever their secure threshold was, the Olympus Bolts are saying, all right, at X amount of HP, we'll call it 3,000 just for the sake of argument. Drop everything you've got, we'll Kukulkan ult and secure the objective. And French Emperor appears to have landed in just the right location at just the right time to stall out that objective DPS and prevent them from reaching that damage threshold and meeting the damage check required to get the objective. So the Yomi Tanuki now in a quite commanding position, JMac. I mean, I don't think we've seen them in the lead so far this set whatsoever, save for a couple of thousand gold here and there in this game. They're absolutely the ones calling the shots now.
5,000 up. Third beacon spawned in, capped up. Yomi Tanuki with 4 with the Fire Giant. After a bit of a misplay from Pikarino before that one. Walks up into enemy lines, a little too comfortable with how well he's been able to kind of maneuver around the map. Gets caught out, nearly losing another one from the Yomi Tanuki. Olympus Bolts try to start that fire, but one misplay sometimes is all it needs to turn the tides back in favor to your enemy. Yomi Tanuki gonna clear up the minion wave. Titan once again marching up right side. No Fire Giant to fight for. Instead, it could just be the push for the Yomi Tanuki towards this right side. And I guess now for the Olympus Bolts, how is the siege for this team like? I mean, you have a very traditional mage in the Kukulkan and the Raijin.
Yep.
Is this just a sit back, wait for them to come to us, or is this a team that you'd like to see maybe kind of initiate the fights?
They have some of the best siege defense tools, in particular, out of their mage. Kukulkan is pretty much the best in the business for being able to clear a wave effectively from a safe distance, not have to worry about getting engaged on for doing it, and still have at least 1 or 2 relevant cooldowns left available after you actually clear out the wave. So Olympus Bolts aren't in the worst spot, and actually Yomi Tanuki could potentially struggle to make their way in here. I don't see a great initiation for them. Their poke is okay, I guess. Pikarino's is fairly short range. French Emperor can land a wall stun, but that's about it for what they're going to be doing as when it comes to lowering the health bars before the initial engagement. The difficult thing for them is going to be, what are you walking in with? And the Titan would certainly help in that conversation, but if you're not Janus ulting, if you're not Thor ulting, don't have great initiation tools to actually walk your way into the Phoenix. So this Titan could actually be pretty relevant for them.
StreakUp gonna try and get some damage in with those enhanced range autos, while double tap lands on the Dutsher. The tower's not taking a whole lot of damage. Pikarino sitting off to the side. Should at least be the tier 2 tower for the Olympus Bolts, but will not push any further on their siege towards Phoenix. They're taking a little bit too much damage, too much time. Given the comp that you were mentioning here, a bit difficult for this Yomi Tanuki to really get inside of these birds, inside of these towers, and really get the fight going. So instead, we'll just play more on the passivity, at least, of the Olympus Bolts. Don't want to walk and defend. Dutsher ultimate to bail himself out, but Pikarino snipes the back line, takes out most of Bero and French and OtherTheAnother. Tries to get him into the pal out, but StreakUp's already on the horse to mount his way out, and FrenchEmperor dunks right in and takes him down. Now Dutsher on the run because Pikarino is like an assassin in this jungle, just keeps diving in, diving out, bobbing and weaving his way through these fights to pick up a double kill in the blink of an eye. 2 more down on the Bolts, but Pikarino falls to Bero. And now it's a 4 versus 2 push towards Phoenix. Duduin by himself, barely able to get the Thunder Crash off. But the Yomi Tanuki, bit slow on the siege of the bird. The Runic Bomb will certainly help that and helps them get another one.
Bombs go down and do secure the bird, as you mentioned, and not necessarily the bird they anticipated that they'd be getting for this siege, but do certainly manage to grab it. And you're totally right to characterize Pikarino as an assassin in this composition, because that's realistically what his job is. I mean, he's not going to be sitting with the rest of his team, and backdrop for this conversation, Yomi Tanuki should be getting this FG. He doesn't really get the opportunity to just walk up with the rest of his team, play a traditional backline style mage. He's responsible for putting damage onto Bero, trying to one-shot Lode if at all possible, and he forces the beads off of the Aegis off Kukulkan in that team fight, prevents him from getting any further forward. And it got real messy real fast, J-Mac. Everybody jumped in. OtherTheAnother got excellent penetration to the enemy backline, forced a ton of relics that are very relevant, forced out the Undying Love, the beads, and the Aegis off of StreakUp. I mean, they got excellent penetration, but this is kind of what I was talking about very early on, is that OtherTheAnother can't do the job by himself. If Duduin isn't up there with him, if Bero doesn't somehow manage to find some damage into the backline, it's just categorically unlikely that OtherTheAnother will actually get any of these kills successfully. Yomi Tanuki wait for the engage, or call it the re-engage from the Olympus Bolts, back up, regroup, and then come in from the sides. It's a pincer maneuver from FrenchEmperor and Pikarino. Incredibly difficult to deal with, especially as an immobile mage like BeroTheBeast is on this Kukulkan. That was probably their best fight, was around that weird middle corridor where you don't have to walk into a bird outright and you can instead play around the flank, go through these walls. It was very, very well done from the Yomi Tanuki, and now their job gets a whole lot easier.
Middle Phoenix down, sieging up left. FrenchEmperor by himself in the jungle. Ward does manage to spot him out at the least, so the Bolts know where the team is kind of snaking around more than anything, but immediately de-warded now by the Yomi Tanuki, so that vision that was afforded to the Olympus Bolts has now been lost. And with 3 people over here on this side, waiting for that opportunity to jump into the Phoenix, to jump right to the back line. And with one easy way to get the whole team there in Pikarino, or one lone man army of FrenchEmperor, waiting for a potential combo that could come from the 2 of them. The Yomi Tanuki are playing this siege very slowly, waiting for these minions to push up in mid, waiting for Olympus Bolts to send 1 too many players away from the birds so they can walk in and try and take it.
Do have a bit of sustain. Wave is coming, though, so they could look to jump in here.
Wave started up. Calvin tanking up a bit. Portal just misses Dutsher. FrenchEmperor misses out a chance on a load. Instead, teleports right to the back with the hammer. And it's a 1-for-1 trade in an instant. But now it's low health bars on the Yomi Tanuki. Dutsher goes in with ult, but he only picks up 1. And the Serpent of Nine wins. Doesn't get the damage they were looking for. Pikarino's still alive at the end. It's a double kill for him. Low health bars on the remaining 2 teammates of his own. Bero going to play the lone defense to try and keep StreakUp and Calvin out. They're going to resustain in. The minions, at least one of them survives through, and that's enough time for StreakUp to take down left Phoenix. A 3-for-2 trade, plus a bird for the Tanuki.
And a perfect little example of how this composition is supposed to work is, hang on a second, Yomi Tanuki, okay, I thought that they were going to go for the right Phoenix there as well. That would have been a bit greedy, but they'd be able to grab this mid here. FrenchEmperor dove. I'm not going to have time to talk about this, man. Let's check out what's going on in the mid lane.
Oh, Dutsher's walking up. He doesn't have ultimate. Does have his emblem. Falls through the portal, and there's about 40% of his health in the blink of an eye. Sent back to the fountain. This time just by him walking that direction. It'll be the Yomi Tanuki sticking around while the Phoenix respawns and goes down right away. But what? Pikarino just fires up the shotgun ult into Bero's face, takes him down, but the dot from Dutsher's first ability will make sure that he goes down. Duduin chase again, Thunder Crash, try and catch out Calvin. If he can land the Raijin, maybe keep that chase up, but just off the mark, just a little too shy this time.
2 birds down in favor of the Yomi Tanuki. Fire Giant is still a ways off, so Yomi Tanuki do have at least some time to respawn. And that's a great wall onto Lode. Jumps away. No Pikarino to erase him from a distance, so Lode will be alive even after not using beads or Aegis there. And as the Yomi Tanuki to do the Pyromancer here, J-Mac, you gotta wonder what the game plan is gonna be for the Olympus Bolts, because clearly whatever you're doing on the siege defense is not working. French Emperor is getting exactly where he needs to be in the backline, even if it cost him his own life. He seems totally content to be the one falling as long as enough attention is off of Calvìn and StreakUp, and ideally Pikarino as well, that they can successfully walk into that bird and drop as much damage as necessary. The combination of French Emperor and Pikarino in particular seems to be the linchpin of the engagements for the Yomi Tanuki. It's French Emperor going in first, baiting out cooldowns, grouping up the enemy, and once the response comes through from the Olympus Bolts, once they try to go for the re-engage, that's when Pikarino's been striking. Gonna fish for a wall here, and the tension is definitely on, J-Mac. You can tell that the Olympus Bolts do not want to give this up for free.
Calvìn gonna walk through the tornado, back to the rest of his team. Fire Giant respawned and enhanced. Another cut on the wrong side of the wall. It's sent back immediately. Pikarino 8-3 on the Janus. The rest of the team heading over right. Duduin gets caught out by himself. StreakUp gonna go up onto the mounted archery to slow him down, but he's now surrounded by the entirety of the Yomi Tanuki squad. Up in the ultimate, not enough. And a Serpent of 9 wins, only clips Calvìn this time. He's going to throw up the ultimate and a heal. Big damage onto Lode, and a dunk by French Emperor. Make sure to secure the kill. Bero, low, no beads, no Aegis available to him. French Emperor right to the back, but a big shot from Bero responds and takes him down. Dutsher sit back in a body bag in a Titan low. The Yomi Tanuki will walk up and tie up the set 1-1.
And an excellent clap back from them in that one. It looked not close at certain times in that game, J-Mac. I mean, Pikarino looked lights out on this Janus, exactly where he needs to be. Clips 2 people with the through space and time at the end of that engagement. And French Emperor just didn't seem to get the job done in that one the way that he needed to. I mean, or excuse me, OtherTheAnother on the Daji. It really felt like he was just a solo agent in the backline at a lot of times. And when you lack the damage, if you can't kill somebody by yourself, that's when these mage solos really start to hurt you as a jungler.
It really felt like we just never got to see the beads combo pressure from the side of the Olympus Bolts. Either you have dodgy Xing Chen, but it was always just, okay, well, I used mine. Okay, well, I'm dead, so I don't have any kind of follow-up melee from you. Olympus Bolts fall down here in game number 2. The Yomi Tanuki able to tie things up. We'll see who gets to move on the upper end of the bracket in game 3 right after this break.
One, two, three, let's go.
Well, it's a tie set here as we jump into this. And again, Shelly, first off, that one, I gotta give the shout out to where the shout out is. Janus ults through and through, man. Like, just the amount of times they hit someone, chunked them down, and set up a good fight for the Tanuki. It feels like it really did get the ball rolling for a lot of the fights. There was a lot more that went on than that, but those stood out.
Yeah, I mean, you get to see like maybe 1 or 2 big Janus ults in a normal set. So when you get to see one Janus ult that hits 2 people for over 1,000 damage towards the end of that game, you gotta give credit towards Pikarino, because this was very annoying to try and deal with. I'm also going to give shouts out to Calvìn. We highlighted early on that the Aphrodite would get good value into things like Bero's ultimate, into OtherTheAnother's ultimate, into, you know, Dutsher's ultimate, all of these. But it really did seem like Calvìn just being linked to carries, amplifying them, healing them, but more importantly, making them immune to damage in CC. Ended up just, like, look at this. StreakUp just gets to be an absolute warhorse, because who's going to stop him? He's got so much, and that's all that Calvìn is providing here. So I really did like the duo lane as well from the Yomi Tanuki, because another thing we highlighted before, sometimes this Afro pick can be hit or miss, and Calvìn was definitely hitting.
Yeah, and honestly, it feels like the comp that they played into, I'm not going to say made it hit harder, but it definitely got to play a little bit better, right? Like, suddenly, like you said, you're getting a lot more value out of every tick of immunity that you have, as long as you're using it to get rid of one or multiple of those abilities. And when you're playing the way Pikarino played, honestly, everybody seemed to step up here. But when you're playing the way Pikarino played, it really enables it. 3-0 and 16. Holy crap!
Look at StreakUp's damage.
And 37.3 thousand. Holy smokes, my man brought the Hachi out. Look, I'm gonna be honest. Hachi, in my mind, he like resets to just neutral, right? Like, I never expect, oh, hey, Hachi's going to carry this game or pop off this game, or Hachi's going to feed his brains out. He's always like, hey, that guy went 3-1 and 3.
Like, Hachi will do his job.
Yeah, he existed. He got some shots out there. He came in late game. StreakUp went above and beyond, and like you said, that's the help of Calvìn. I think Pikarino, FrenchEmperor look really good. OgiBre, unfortunately, has the 1 in 4 slash line, but it comes at the you were the solo lane Poseidon and had to do the solo lane Poseidon job, which really helped set up the rest of the team. So all in all, the Tanuki, I think, looked great. Bolts, like you had mentioned, just kind of stumble a couple of times, OtherTheAnother, Bero's, and Dutsher's ults, unfortunately, maybe not hitting as much as they would like. So we'll see how they change that as we jump into Game 3, and how well they do as they take first pick here. I believe for the first time this set, Bolts will be on the left side of the screen. And the question is, what kind of things do they change? Well, they saw the Thor.
Yep.
They don't want to see the Thor no more. So they ban him, the Chernobog, and the Raijin, switching up some of their bans from last time. Puch, Heimdallr will stay down there from the Tanuki, along with the Maman, which leaves open, again, quite a few picks up at the top.
Whew.
But someone we haven't gotten to see because she's been banned the entire time. Athena finally gets locked in.
Yeah, and the Tanuki are going to run back the Poseidon, which is interesting considering, what we just saw. But of course, as you said, I think tanking all of that damage, taking all that pressure away from the carries for the Tanuki is still valuable. And so far this set, considering the ADCs haven't been getting too many of the last hits per se, but their damage has been insane. This might be a battle of the duo lane. That's the reason Heimdallr's banned right now. Lode had a fantastic performance on it. And now Lode gets his hands on the Hachiman, which we just saw a great performance on the other side. So the Tanuki are going to have to pivot, get something new in that duo. Looks like the Anhur doesn't have that same late game hard carry potential, but early pressure attached to an Aphrodite could be a great start.
OgiBre's hands look like 1 in 4, so that StreakUp's hands can be 3-0 and 16, right? 8 kills for your carries. Yeah, that's the setup that you want to see. So again, going for the side in the Afro, and like you mentioned, the Anhur in the duo lane is going to keep things interesting. Back to the Janus as well. Pikarino, look, we feed the hot hand when you got it. And that's exactly what they're going to go for. I'm also really interested to see this trailer because, Kukulkan, we've talked a lot about him. Hachi, we've talked a lot about. But Set and Loki. And Loki feels like, I would call it the Johnny special. And he's not playing in this one. So it is definitely something that is not really picked up too often anywhere.
I'm curious about that Nem lock-in just because what does Nem do best? Slows, and look at all the slow immunity on the side of the Bolts. Like, it's going to be difficult because you have a decent matchup into the set, I suppose. It's not like he's breaking your shield at any point. I'm assuming Set goes solo here, but both Loki and Set are interchangeable in that regard, so it just depends on what the Bolts want to go for. But Nem's going to have a hard time getting much value out of that slows, right? The sprints, the slow immunities, and the Cuckoo, the Set, and the Loki, that's going to be annoying to try and deal with. But I guess if you're just a very fast composition like the Tanuki have, you can use Janus for mobility, you can use the Aphrodite for mobility, and of course the Poseidon. They're just going to try and run the Bolts down and get to late game before they even have a chance.
Well, it's all down to this, right? It's all tied up. Winner of this one, again, will be playing Hex Mambo, I believe, tomorrow as we continue in the bracket. But they got to win this one first, so to find out who's going to do it, we'll jump down to the casters.
Thank you so much, Gore and Charlie, over on the desk. That's right, it's game number 3. Winner moves on to play Hex Mambo and a chance to qualify up into Group C here at the qualifiers in the Road to Worlds for the SCC European side. It's J-Mac Kaizo joins me one final time as we jump into game number 3 between the Tanuki and the Bolts. Let's see who will be that team to move on the upper side of the bracket. And immediately, I think I go exactly where the desk did at the very end there. Loki. Notably, Loki not in the jungle. It's actually going to be a solo lane Loki for Duduin in this one. Give me your thoughts just maybe on the god in general, and especially now, the god into kind of the solo mage meta that's evolved.
I am definitely on board with the desk where you see Loki, you immediately assume that Johnny's going to be in the game somewhere, but no Johnny this time around. Instead, Duduin's going to be grabbing this one. And this is going to sound potentially real weird, J-Mac, but Loki's kind of a mage solo, just doing physical damage. Like, he's there to build kind of hybrid, do a weirdly high amount of damage even despite building hybrid, clear their wave really well, poke you really well. The only thing that he doesn't get that a lot of these mages get is access to the Vampiric Shroud. That's what makes so many of these mages so difficult to deal with, is their sustain is wacky and silly and goofy. Like, I'm talking, it takes you 1 wave, maybe 2 waves at most, before you can completely sustain from almost 0 HP back to full HP with the Vampiric Shroud Pythags build. The Loki has to be a little bit more careful with the way that he manages his health bar, but same general gist of clear wave, build hybrid, and do as much damage as possible while still being tanky.
Double top by Dutsher. After the follow-up from StreakUp in, Emperor blinks forward, gets the Heavenly Wings away from Dutsher, so no access to that slow immunity for at least another 2 minutes now on the left-hand side, but getting the blink away from FrenchEmperor. A great start for the Olympus Bolts, so it did cost Lode his beads as well. It's a great jump initiation by StreakUp on the Anhur. And I think really, well, one of the big things that also maybe helps kind of me stand out for this Olympus Bolts team has been this Athena. She's been top pick, top ban, up in the 95+% at the SPL level for almost the entirety of this last phase. SCC has been very similar for her. Surprised to see that this god made it through, but especially with some of the follow-up that the Olympus Bolts have for this pick.
Yeah, and I'm so mad, by the way, that we don't get to actually see any Athena. It's my absolute favorite character to play. I don't want to brag, J-Mac, but I am #1 ranked Athena in the game right now. So I'm something of an expert myself when it comes to this pick, and she is just that good. Like, it is no folly whatsoever that people are picking and banning her so often. Being able to rotate the map fully globally as a support is absurd. Like, remember back to however many seasons ago when Terra had a global ultimate ability, how incredibly broken that made her because she could impact the map from anywhere. Dutsher does essentially the same thing, and then can also be wherever he needs to be on this map. And the entire time giving movement speed, giving mitigation, landing, and giving some of the most reliable setup the entire game has to offer. It's so incredibly frustrating to deal with when you're lined up against the Athena. And you're totally right that the follow-up that Dutsher has in this game is incredible. Like, Bero dropping a Tornado, dropping a Zephyr, that is comparable damage to most mages dumping an ultimate ability into that engagement. You add a Spirit of the Nine Winds on top of that, you add any damage whatsoever from Lode, who gets to go back onto this Hachiman, and we're talking about an absurd surplus of damage that it'll be one-shotting squishies for sure, don't get me wrong, but if Calvìn gets caught in the wrong side of one of these taunts, even with the items under his belt, even after Thebes is fully stacked, gets a Spirit Robe online, which he absolutely does need this game, still unlikely that he ends up living that.
Moves forward to dash taunt by Dutsher. French has, or OtherTheAnother has joined the fray. This time, Calvin uses the ultimate, but OtherTheAnother still gonna swipe away in that Kingslayer. The auto-assault from Pikarino catches him out. 1-for-1 trade off a great snipe from the mid laner, and now it's FrenchEmperor's turn to maybe jump in this battle, but as soon as they get to the lane, both Pikarino and FrenchEmperor will go ahead and send themselves back. A 1-for-1, nearly a second kill over on the right side to do and use the minions to keep himself alive.
And he's going to tempt fate and step back up one more time, but an excellent engagement from OtherTheAnother, who really shouldn't be punished for that, man. I mean, like, he plays it perfectly, jumps in, kills through the shell, through the after ult, and Bero gets caught out here. Spirit of the Nine wins with some peel, and here comes Athena.
Slow use and ultimate by Dutsher. Make sure to bail out the mid laner. Didn't take too much of a commit from the Yomi Tanuki and try and go for that pick. Just the ultimate used by FrenchEmperor, so no access to that now. Bero plays that patiently, plays it perfectly almost. Just walks away, just holds the single direction, throws an ultimate at his feet and says, I dare you to stand here. FrenchEmperor does, sends him away for a little bit of time and disrupts the fight. But with this 1-for-1, leaves the game nearly at a dead even state here between the Bolts and the Yomi Tanuki. Remember, a loss here in this game is not the end of the road for either team. Just means they got to fight a little bit harder to try and get into that Group C and then try and go for that qualification into, I guess it should say another qualifier round to play against some of the SPL talent to try and go to Worlds.
Yeah, not much of a prize to have to line up against the SPL players at the end of it and then still have to come out on the other end. But that is what these teams are vying for. And something caught my eye here, J-Mac. If we could hover over the Jotun's Vigor,
wow, that's
that
early.
Duduin gets first item overall. Jotun's is, obviously, everybody knows it as the premier cooldown option for these assassins, but in particular, Jotun's Vigor, I see a lot of this when you run into those Loki one-tricks in ranked who only play one character, and Pikarino is actually just dead. I thought that he was going to live that, but no, he actually died through that. Anyway, you see a lot of these Loki players go for this option very early on, and the reason is very good damage, you want the cooldown, but you need sustain in lane, and it gives you some of that, and it might give the Bolts a gold view.
Bolt started up. Ultimate's available for Bero, uses it to secure the objective, but now what about the fight after? FrenchEmperor and Calvin have shown up. 2 low health bars. FrenchEmperor going to get the ultimate from Calvin to keep himself alive, but now to trade out Bero, nearly taken down. One more ability, one more in-hand, one slow will do just enough for a slice and dice from FrenchEmperor, but now it's doing 1 versus 1 against OgiBre. Get some decent damage output, still holding on to the assassinate just in case he needs to escape, or if he thinks he's got a kill chance. Aegis burned by OgiBre and a quick stealth out by Duduin, make sure that he'll be just fine in the fight.
And another Aegis first relic here for OgiBre, which is, I hesitate to say psychotic, but that's the general vibe I'm going for here against an Athena of all characters. And we haven't seen it so far, but don't forget, at any given moment, Dutsher can decide to dunk down into Duduin's lane, and then there is no safety for OgiBre if he gets close to him. That taunt is getting the full duration on top of him. And if you think that you can't kill a Poseidon, I mean, we've seen SPL teams kill a full health Hercules through an item and a half or 2 items with only a Sun Wukong and an Athena. So I'm pretty sure that they could probably find the damage to land a kill onto OgiBre. He's going to have to be extraordinarily careful over there if he wants to avoid taking any spills. He has been playing pretty well on the Poseidon so far, 0-0-0 donuts all the way across, but it is something to keep your eye on because he absolutely could be a target if the Bolts get antsy, if something doesn't go right on the left-hand side of the map. They do have targets elsewhere, like
Kingslayer used as well as Dutsher's ult. Crack it, expend it, but OgiBre's got nothing when there's 3 ults on top. FrenchEmperor quickly turns to fight another big ult from Pikarino. These snipes have been on point to get him to the fight and also to clip the health bars of the enemy. Duduin tries to stealth away. Does Pikarino have the shot? He does, but it's not enough damage. Just a couple more health would have been enough to secure FrenchEmperor to the backline. Aegis used, but he still gets the job done. Dutsher, the only one left alive on the right-hand side as the Olympus Bolts fall to the Yomi Tanuki.
Double tower dive there, and it's a 2-for-1 at the end of the day in favor of the Yomi Tanuki. They lose OtherTheAnother and Duduin for the Olympus Bolts, and it's only OgiBre that ends up taking a spill there, despite all of the ultimates expended. And I gotta bring it up again, man. I mean, they talked about it on the desk, how Pikarino, you rarely see more than a couple of Janus ults hit the mark throughout the course of a game. Pikarino already has 2 very important ones in this one. Clipped 2 people at the end of last game. I mean, Janus is absolutely one of those feel kind of characters where you get into a groove, you're hitting everything, and it's next to impossible to deal with this guy. So if he can continue this pace and keep being this effective all the way across the map, it's going to be very hard for the Olympus Bolts to play against it, even with the global potential that Dutsher provides.
I mean, as soon as I saw OtherTheAnother walk in, I said, okay, he's just going to poke OgiBre, no big deal. And then I saw Kingslayer pop, said, oh, we're about to have a fight break out, and a fight we had. Took 3 to kill off the Poseidon, but again, that immediate response back from Pikarino, FrenchEmperor, turn the tide and pick up a couple for themselves. 4-3 now leads the kills for the Yomi Tanuki, but still nearly dead even in this game. Only a couple hundred gold separating these two teams. Experience more in favor of the Yomi Tanuki in this case. OgiBre able to keep himself afloat over on the other side, where it's mostly just coming from the mid and the jungle more than anything on the side of Yomi Tanuki. FrenchEmperor is able to keep ahead of the pacing and farm at least ahead of OtherTheAnother. But has been a bit behind on the curve on the ganks. Has really gone for kind of that counter gank style. If somebody shows up, I need to make my fast response and head to the opposite side.
And it's been FrenchEmperor on the other side of things who has been kind of dictating the pace of this one. And I think a lot of that is due in part to the fact that Calvìn is back on this Aphrodite, and game number 2 was very defensive Aphrodite pick. This is something of a hybridized Aphro pick where it's very good hooked up to the Nemesis, but also gets good value against the Athena. Gold Fury started by the Tanuki.
Pick up Oni Fury. Meanwhile, it's a few over on the side to kill OgiBre once more. Double assassin dive. OgiBre's got nowhere to go. Too much damage coming from the comp of the Olympus Bolts. So the Fury has not been reset by the Yomi Tanuki. Instead, it's ultimate fired off by Pikarino to the backline to try and secure Fury. Yomi Tanuki do get the Fury, but they will not continue for the fight after Pikarino has done his job. He's zoned out the bolts to allow his team to get the objective.
And that's one of the harder things to teach players, in particular mid laners, about what your job is around the objective fights. Because more often than not, a mid laner's job is you are the secure mage. You're something like Bero with the Spirit of the Nine Winds, where it gets low. Your job is to be there in the pit and land the killing blow onto the objective. But not every mage plays like that. I mean, you've got things like Janus, like Morgan Le Fay, like Thoth. Well, Thoth is a bad example, but Janus and Morgan Le Fay are the 2 that come to mind immediately, who want to be a little bit farther forward, making sure nobody can step up. You don't have the most reliable damage on the objective, but you can certainly provide sufficient threat to essentially play zone duty and do the solo laner's job in a way of just keeping people away and securing the objective, not with the damage, but just with the space that you create. So Pikarino steps up there, makes sure that Lode can't get forward, and Yomi Tanuki get that one pretty cleanly.
Yomi Tanuki stepping up to the platform as a beacon has spawned in here at this 12-minute mark. Taunt by Dutsher, uses the ultimate to try and channel to get himself out of danger, but instead he goes right back in with OtherTheAnother. Pikarino snipe, I think this time just barely off the mark to catch anybody, but still it's another dive in. Taunt onto Calvìn, pulls him right back into the tornado and keeps him locked in. Kill for the Olympus Bolts mid laner this time, able to keep themselves afloat, go back towards that beacon and cap the first spawn.
They're going to grab it. I'd say uncontested, but they absolutely fought for it. And I'm looking down at Calvin's build as he's dead here, and I'd love to see a Spirit Row from him here, because the CC from the Olympus Bolts, not particularly reliable. Anytime you're getting crowd controlled, you know that there's some other damage that's going to be coming your way. It's really only if you get assassinated by Loki, if you get taunted in by Dutsher, or you get, God forbid, dashed on by Lode at some point. You absolutely would get giga value from Spirit Row. That is probably your best option to keep you alive. Instead, Calvìn, ever selfless as a support player, goes for this Relic Dagger instead, wanting to keep that shell off cooldown as much as possible, which is incredibly good against something like the set. It's near impossible to Aegis the damage that a set is going to put out. Any effective HP, we're talking Geb Shield, a Shell, a Meditation, those kinds of things, typically better at keeping you alive against the perpetual dive that Kingslayer represents. So it does make sense. It's just providing even more of a target on his head for the Olympus Bolts to focus down on.
To see a small group up in mid. OtherTheAnother walking around for the time being, seeing maybe where his next target will be. It could be back towards OgiBre. He's been under the eye of caution for the better half of at least the last 5 or 6 minutes of the game, with a couple of ganks dedicated his way. But it's Pyromancer for the Olympus Bolts. Bero's ultimate a bit early, but still enough damage after to confirm that one for themselves. So Pyromancer firmly in the pockets now of the Olympus Bolts and gives themselves about a 2,500 gold lead over the Yomi Tanuki. Not a significant lead here 14 minutes into the game. We've seen larger leads be squandered by other teams over the course of history. Even just today, we've seen 4,000 or 5,000 gold leads at 20 mean absolutely nothing to some of these players. The Olympus Bolts, more than anything, trying to maybe regain momentum for themselves, especially after losing that objective to the Yomi Tanuki prior, being zoned out by Pikarino. Keeping eyes on this Janus. Again, I said in game number 2, it's easier said than done, keeping watch on where Pikarino is.
Yep.
But now also not having to worry about the impending Thor dunk from the sky out of nowhere maybe makes things a bit easier for the Olympus Bolts.
Definitely, and they do have, well, hang on a second. StreakUp should be dead here with all the forces that have garnered on the left-hand side of the map. OtherTheAnother jumps in. He should just be dead to rights, but look at the rotation!
Skewer miss. B-Tank gets used. FrenchEmperor dives in. Runic Bomb has already been dropped on the floor. No value from that one. It's set to kill on OtherTheAnother. Ultimate used by Lode. Use the Mount Archer to get out of danger, but Dutsher is stuck in the middle of 4, and FrenchEmperor picks up the double kill. Now with OgiBre nearby, Bero's not even safe. B-Tank gets used. Calvìn trying to body block the best he can, and with the Duduin showing up, has to use the ultimate. One used onto Pikarino, but Spear from the 9 wins, doesn't get the kill. Instead, it's a tornado onto Calvìn. Big stun, though, by Duduin in the back. Picks up StreakUp, takes him down, and makes it a 2 for 2. And maybe about to be third. Pikarino dropped by Lode. The banner, just enough damage.
And the Olympus Bolts, with sufficient members to at least contend with the idea of a Gold Fury, would be somewhat difficult for them with OgiBre and FrenchEmperor still around, but looks like they're going to retreat back and give this one away. So an excellent fight there from the Olympus Bolts, and I thought for sure that StreakUp was just going to die and that was going to be the end of it, but it got so much worse than that somehow for the Yomi Tanuki. I thought for sure that with the rotation coming in, they had the excellent angle behind the bulk of the engagement from the Olympus Bolts, that something was going to go right for them, but the rotation over from Duduin was so much more impactful than we saw out of OgiBre. And granted, OgiBre dumps a Kraken into an Aegis. There's only so much you can do about that as a Poseidon player, but Duduin with this full one-shot you damage build has absolutely left his mark on that team fight.
Well, StreakUp shows up to lane just to inevitably die again. Dutsher tanking up the tower. StreakUp uses his ultimate. It might not be enough. They can't go for the kill without a single relic. StreakUp, of his own accord, able to keep himself alive, nearly turns that fight. Now he's brought the rest of the team with him. Portals from the ultimate out of Pikarino keeps him alive, and now it's a kill onto Dutsher instead. A 2v1 goes sour for the Olympus Bolts, but now their response back is to go to the Fire Giant. They lost Dutsher. They don't have load for the DPS. The Fire Giant is at half HP, and there's not a single sign of the Yomi Tanuki here just yet because they don't have Pikarino to tax them through. Fire Giant's low, and Fire Giant is gone. The Olympus Bolts, they lose one on left and take the objective on right.
OgiBre's not happy with that, though. He's going to try to get something here on the back end, but Kingslayer immediately.
It gets used by Other. OgiBre now has the backup from Calvìn. All the Tanuki are here, but can they even find a pick with the safety of the tower? The Olympus Bolts might just be fine, especially with Lode and Dutsher back up. And Dutsher having that ultimate means we could see the Olympus Bolts turn right back in and try and go for this fight. OtherTheAnother straight to the back line. The Olympus Bolts slowly but surely making their way through this jungle to try and close in this gap. But instead, gets clipped by Pikarino, and now it's the Olympus Bolts back on the run, and it's StreakUp right back in. Bero taken down by one, but OtherTheAnother makes it a 1-for-1 trade. Triple taunt by Dutsher. Keeps the rest of the team alive, but it's Pikarino trying to go for the snipe. Misses out on this one as Lode takes down StreakUp, and the Yomi Tanuki on the run. Pikarino through one portal, but right to his potential death. Dutsher doesn't have the damage to go for the follow-up yet. Needs dash, needs a bit more, but he gets stunned out, and that's the end of the road for them.
He's got to retreat, though. Duduin is here, so the Olympus Bolts grab the FG, lose 2 of the buffs, and Duduin will dunk in and actually manage to land the kill onto Pikarino. Shoutouts to the Assassinate there, getting that one done. So it's 2 for 2 at the end of the day, and 3 Fire Giant buffs still alive for the Olympus Bolts, and That's just excellent opportunity capitalization by them. They try to go for the pick and left. StreakUp makes one hell of an individual play to somehow manage to live long enough through that dive that it takes even more resources invested by the Yomi Tanuki on that side of the map. But it doesn't matter because the Olympus Bolts see the Janus ult go left, know how many people are there because Dutsher and Lode give them the information from the lane. And without the Janus ult, they're just lacking the ability to make it all the way from dual lane over to the FG pit before that goes down. And if you're rocking a traditional warrior, if you've got, we'll say, a Chaac or something, because that's been the flavor of the month in solo lane, you probably don't land that kill onto the FG in time. It might be only because Duduin is on specifically a pure damage character in the solo lane. They managed to get that one before the rest of the Tanuki can show up. Bero drops the ult, and nobody was close enough for the Olympus Bolts, but could have been closer. I mean, it was an excellent attempt there from the Tanukis to take that fight. Unfortunately for them, the Olympus Bolts were more than ready for it.
Lode uses the mounted archery. Few too many of the Yomi Tanuki nearby for comfort, and now it's the Tanuki who instead pull the Oni Fury. Likely no contest from the Bolts unless Bero can get a stray ultimate. Kraken use, secures the Fury for the Yomi Tanuki, but look at this again, another sign of split pushing. All 5 of the Tanuki over on left, so the Olympus Bolts will split push the Phoenix on right. They might lose Dutsher for it, they might not even, because he's right back to the safety with Lode. Portal just off the mark. The turn fire back from the Bolts is too much for the Tanuki, and look at what the rest of the Bolts are doing. They're just gonna clean sweep through the rest of the objectives. The right side Phoenix down, who cares? Head over towards mid. They might lose a life for this one, but they'll take it down. 2 Phoenixes burned away. FrenchEmperor versus OtherTheAnother, and Other might just be out of this one. Second dash in by FrenchEmperor. He needs the speed, but it's a turn back as the Duduin shows right back up for backup. And now it's the Olympus Bolts with 2 Phoenixes, a kill, and not a single death from all of it.
Wow, like thieves in the night, they make out with not only that fight in left, completely clean, nobody dying somehow, despite the way that engagement shook down, but also backdooring the middle bird after pushing into the right one with the minion wave. I didn't think they'd have time, I didn't think they'd have damage, health bars, fill in the blank, J-Mac, but somehow the Olympus Bolts walk away with both of those birds, and now this is getting dire for the Yomi Tanuki.
Bero turns back around after being stunned by Calvìn from the kiss, but not going to be any further follow-up from the Tanuki. FrenchEmperor tries to make the hero play, gets turned into a sidekick by Duduin, and a nice little wrap back around by him. Keeps the Olympus Bolts alive, and with a near 10,000 gold lead that the Olympus Bolts are pushing up at this point, 2 Phoenixes down. Maybe the silver lining for the Yomi Tanuki is that it's the 2 easier Phoenixes to manage around these fire giants. The problem is, you know, you're 9,000 plus gold down at this point, trying to defend not only Phoenixes, but a fire giant as well. Feels like it's a bit difficult, at least for how the pacing of this game has gone for the Tanuki. Every team fight they show up to try and go for, the Olympus Bolts have just been one step ahead of the curve.
The Tanuki don't seem deterred by that, though. They are grouped up around the FG pit, but the split push is still on from the Assassins, the Olympus Bolts. The Tanukis need to either take a convincing fight or grab this FG fast.
Dutsher dropped through portal. Pikarino gets saved a little bit by Calvìn. 0-9 wins off the mark by Bero. Just trying to keep eyes on Pikarino. The Fire Giant goes to the Yomi Tanuki. But what about the fight after? The double assassins of the Bolts have now shown up. FrenchEmperor has already expended his dash, just uses his shield, and it's not going to be enough. Lode takes down 1, and the rest of the team collapses back in. Somebody doing off the assassinate, and Dutsher on the way to keep OtherTheAnother alive. It's a double kill for Lode, and the fight keeps pushing forward. OgiBre has used everything he's gotten as a slow for Bero to allow the rest of the team to go in. Triple kill on the way, but Dutsher takes that one out, and OtherTheAnother claims a 4th. Pikarino, the only one left alive. The Yomi Tanuki have to bank on their mid laner to defend against 5. He's got plenty of damage, but he doesn't have relics, he doesn't have health, and the Yomi Tanuki don't have a leg to stand on. The Olympus Bolts close it out in 23 minutes to take the game and the set.
spectacular stuff for the Olympus Bolts there. They've taken at least 2, if not 3 different fights, GMAC, where they were down 3 members against 5 and just fought back on uneven footing, buying just enough time for the split push. I mean, usually, if you're split pushing 2 Phoenixes, you're giving something up, be that Fire Giant, be that a Phoenix of your own, you're giving up the team fight. But regardless, the Bolts somehow came out on top of or stalemated every single engagement. Spectacular stuff from them. The split push was amazing. The Athena looked great. The combination of the assassins was unbeatable for them.
And one of our fastest pacings that we've seen in a game so far this week, the Olympus Bolts with a 2-1 win over the Yomi Tanuki. They move on to face the Hex Mambo, but we'll throw it back over to our desk so they can break down the game.
Well, Shelly, I feel like we got a lot of it from Kaizo there at the end, right? A lot of back and forth this game, and for every loss, it feels like the Bolts had found a victory somewhere else until they eventually could just turn it into a victory itself.
Yeah, they had the gold lead, they had the team comp. Sure, you lose that last Fire Giant, but at that point, who cares? As Kaizo said, you lose your birds. You got the double assassin dive, the Loki, the set. They were going absolutely insane. I was very impressed with OtherTheAnother. Throughout the entirety of this set, no pun intended, just seemed like was dominating not only in the solo side of the map, but able to, make that use elsewhere as well. Duo, both side lanes were feeling that pressure, and that's exactly your job as a jungler. So very solid composition there, and of course giving Dutsher over towards this Athena. There's a reason this pick is so strong. That global presence, this ultimate, just being able to set up for your team no matter where you are on the map, ended up working out for them so well. And that's how you dominate just not just one area, not just the jungle, but the entirety of a SMITE map. So very impressed with the Olympus Bolts here. I'm excited to see what they can do in the rest of this tournament.
Yeah, especially when you have play like that. I feel like stepping up and locking things in. Again, they were the 6th seed. And so being able to take down the Tanuki is a pretty big deal for them. And of course, it is not necessarily the easiest set in the world, right? It goes 3 for a reason. But like you said, I think what we got to see in this last game was a lot of the spark and play that enables this team. And I'm a big fan of seeing good Athena play. We got to see that through and through. So it is with excitement that the Bolts win this one. And with that, close out this set, take a win 2-1. And we'll move on in the upper bracket. Still have a couple chances to earn their way to the Group C, I guess the 3rd group, right? The last double elim group that has the shot at Worlds. Of course, it's not the end of the world for the Tanuki, since it's double elim. They're just going to be hanging out in the bottom bracket for now, but they are, Trelly, in official backs against the wall territory. We'll take a look at that bracket in just a little bit as we close this one out, but really that's what it is. So for Group A, we've solidified the first 2 sets of their bracket. And again, we've got, I think it's only 3 more per bracket, right? After today that we're going to have. The winner of their 3rd set in this group is going to go to Group C. The loser of the 4th set in this group, maybe I have those backwards, will end up getting knocked out. We'll see it right here, right now. So it will be the Olympus Bolts winner that we just saw, taking on Hex Mambo, who we saw win set number 1. And then eventually Tanuki will take on Yodi Gang. Loser of that gets knocked out. Winner gets 1 more shot to advance to Group C. And so a lot of pressure there for them. Of course, Hex Mambo and Bolts, they immediately get to go to Group C, whoever wins that one, and earn themselves the top 4 spot in the EU playoffs. And then have to fight through 1 more double elim group before they make it to those top 2 spots. Join us coming at the very, 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 very beginning of January, that first weekend, in order to get here, play through the qualifiers on LAN against the SBL teams, and do their best in a similar format to try and earn their spot at Worlds. But they've still got a long path to go there, and that's still only one of the groups. We're going to be switching back over to Group B, knocking out 1 more set, but all of that is going to be coming right after this. So we'll be right back, and then we'll have more SMITE.